Chapter 674. Qin Ikuin and Gauda were undoubtedly devoted to their duties as Luo Nan's two bodyguards. They had a clear division of labor. God stood outside the office, acting as a door god. Qin Ikuin, on the other hand, was in an inconspicuous corner of the office, guarding close to prevent any strong enemies from sneaking in and assassinating him. To be honest, Qin Ikuin felt a little out of sorts tonight. He felt a little uneasy standing in the house. It was as if there was something else nearby. He had already confirmed with God many times, but the two of them did not find anything. This made them even more nervous. At that moment, he noticed Bamboo Pole's words in the mission channel. For a moment, he felt a pang in his heart. Perhaps the previous scene was an illusion caused by Luo Dashing's silent thundercloud? They clearly knew that the thundercloud in the surrounding void was brought forth by Luo Nan, and that it bore no malice towards them. However, if one were to remain in it for a long period of time, the most important senses of a martial artist would be suppressed and affected to varying degrees. In particular, they were all responsible for their duties and needed to be fully focused. Thus, they were even more sensitive to this influence. It was to the point that when the room was extremely quiet, hearing their own breathing was like hearing the aftermath of distant thunder, gradually entering their souls and causing them to tremble. Bamboo Pole asked Luo Nan to withdraw his powers. Qin Ikuin was undoubtedly relieved. But Luo Nan's response was actually this several seconds later: wait a little longer. In the mission channel, Bamboo Pole sent a question mark emoji. And on the plane of reality, Qin Ikuin looked over in astonishment. Luo Nan's reaction was a bit out of line with his usual personality. Behind the office desk, Luo Nan's elbows were still propped on the surface of the desk. His posture had practically never changed, and he looked to be in a daze from beginning to end. And Qin Ikuin held a certain amount of reverence towards this state. Perhaps Luo Nan was lacking in the way he conducted himself, but Luo Nan possessed a completely different logic of thought from ordinary people. The longer Qin Ikuin interacted with Luo Nan, the more Qin Ikuin was able to understand the depth and breadth of Luo Nan's thoughts. Especially right now. Luo Nan was surrounded by the boundless thundercloud. The power of thought transformed into a concrete and perceptible pressure. There was even a heavy dignity to it, causing Qin Ikuin to subconsciously hold his breath to avoid affecting Luo Nan's train of thought. An unknown amount of time passed before Luo Nan, who was sitting at the desk, slightly raised his head. His gaze seemed to be cast towards the ceiling, but it was unknown what he was looking at. This continued for a few seconds before Luo Nan suddenly pushed the table away. "Boss?" Qin Ikuin asked. "The house is too small. I want to go out for a walk." "Where?" "Let's go to the rooftop. We can see the rooftop of the North Shore's gear. There are more people at this time, but we can always find a quieter place." When he came out of the police office, it was already the wee hours of 2097. Since it was New Year's Eve, it was the busiest time. None of the elevators were in place, so they could only wait. "I still need around a minute and 10 seconds. Luo Nan raised his eyes and made a judgment. He knew the exact location and operating speed of each of the elevators. He also knew if there were people waiting or going to wait on each floor. Through this design and a simple model, he could roughly calculate when the nearest elevator would arrive. Then Luo Nan had no choice but to revise his answer half a minute later. The reason was that after the target elevator stopped on a certain floor, a passenger had purposely blocked the elevator door in order to speak to his friend in the car. Naturally, the previous outcome would be nullified. "I still need to wait another 50 seconds. Sure enough, the greatest variable is still the human. But is he really a variable? Luo Nan unwittingly entered the stage of talking to himself. Qin Ikuin and God looked at each other speechlessly. Luo Nan had a bit of a train of thought, but it wasn't too clear. His gaze seemed to stare fixedly at the elevator door, but in reality, what he was looking at was the fluttering grass stalks and feathers that filled the sky. It was the hearts of the people in and around the large living area that were panicking and restless because of the soundless thundercloud. It was because he wanted to see these that he refused Bamboo Pole's suggestion. The interference waves were already in place, but he still maintained the tyrannical and crude mental interference of the surrounding area. He sat and watched as the turbid flow of the people's negative emotions continued to overflow. The round headlamp above lit up, and the elevator door opened with a jingle. 7 or 8 people walked out. God's large body blocked in front of Luo Nan, passing by these people. There were no threatening targets inside. Everything was calm and tranquil. Luo Nan walked into the car, but then he heard someone call out softly from behind, "Mr. Luo?" Luo Nan turned his head and saw a rather tall and beautiful young woman within the stream of people that had just walked out of the elevator. She was currently bowing to him in greeting. Her body movements were very restrained, and her smile was polite and carried an appropriate amount of respect. It was very much in line with the ladylike style dress she wore. Yuqin? Luo Nan didn't forget this name. Yuqin was the daughter of a certain pharmaceutical company. Her older brother, Yu Zheng, had once clashed with Luo Nan, but Yuqin's calm and intelligent personality made it hard for people to dislike her. She had always been trying to mend her relationship with Luo Nan, especially since she was the best friend of Luo Nan's older cousin, Mo Han, and the doll of the BHD trio, Baiyu. She was also Luo Nan's schoolmate when he was at 6th High. Luo Nan hadn't seen Yuqin ever since the incident at the municipal plaza. She would occasionally send messages online to greet him, but they never went too far. They had always maintained contact. Seeing Luo Nan give a response, Qin Ikuan reached out his hand to block the elevator door, allowing them to speak. Yuqin's dimples suddenly blossomed on the other side. Her polite attitude was quite a bit more intimate. "Happy New Year, Mr. Luo." "Ah, Happy New Year." Strangely enough, on this New Year's Eve, Yuqin was actually the first person to say these words to him. Luo Nan's friends and family had their own chat group. It was bustling, but Luo Nan didn't open it. His aunt, uncle, and the others who were closer to him most likely didn't contact him in consideration of his mysterious operation tonight. As for his inner world circle, everyone was as busy as a dog. They didn't remember this sort of boring matter. All right, though it was boring, it was pretty good to hear this sound. Yuqin walked a few steps over, stopping only when she reached Qin Ikuan's side. Her gaze shifted slightly towards Gao De, and she nodded in greeting. "I felt that Captain Gao looked familiar just now. Then I saw you, Mr. Luo. Otherwise, I would have missed you. Do you guys still want to go up?" Indeed, Yuqin and Gao De had met face to face during the incident at the municipal plaza. Gao De had indeed appeared with the identity of the building's security captain. Luo Nan had clearly only met once, but he was able to completely remember a person's surname and job title. Luo Nan probably wouldn't be able to successfully cultivate this skill in this lifetime. However, as Yuqin spoke, Luo Nan noticed that there was a middle-aged man and woman behind her casting their gazes in this direction. Judging from their age and appearance, they seemed to be her parents. They should be on a family trip, but her older brother wasn't here. This sort of hidden social situation was one of Luo Nan's biggest headaches. He simply acted as if he didn't see it. He just responded dryly, "I have a bit of business." Yuqin's gaze shot a glance at his wrist. She saw Luo Nan's exposed wristband dial, and she was a bit stunned. Then she bit her lower lip, raised her hand in front of her chest, and made a pleading gesture. Her voice dropped an octave. "Mr. Luo, my older brother is also up there. He's with a friend. If you run into him and act foolishly again, please don't bicker with him. Please." As a reserved and introverted beauty, Yuqin was always able to put on a noble and proper posture. And it was because of this that her pleading appearance was all the more moving. Luo Nan had to admit that seeing this scene really made his heart happy. But in the end, he just said, "Oh." He didn't give a clear answer. On one hand, he didn't know how to respond properly. On the other hand, he could feel a clear change in the mood of someone in this area. His gaze went over Yuqin's shoulder and swept over the body of the middle-aged man behind her. Perhaps the middle-aged man had drunk a bit of alcohol. His breathing was a bit hurried. Right now his body was half-turned, seeming to be controlling his breath. In fact, his gaze had been constantly glancing over. Luo Nan's gaze cut over at this time, and the two sides inevitably collided. The middle-aged man's body clearly trembled at this moment. The body language he displayed did not match his status. Luo Nan withdrew his gaze and immediately asked, "Your father?" Yu Qin was a bit startled. She subconsciously turned her head to look, and her heart thumped. Luo Nan indicated to Qin Ikuan that he could enter the elevator during this gap. He also decided to stop the current conversation. "Let's not chat anymore. It's getting late. Pay attention to your safety when you go home." He pressed the button for the floor as he spoke. He nodded towards the stupefied Yu Qin before the elevator door closed. His gaze swept over the middle-aged man behind her once more. The closed elevator door divided their visions. Luo Nan's eyelids drooped, and he stood there silently. Qin Ikuan couldn't help but ask, "Is there anything wrong with that family?" Luo Nan didn't answer immediately. He just continued to retract and focus his incomparably enormous sensory network. Soon, he locked onto his target in a certain location within Aurora Cloud City. Luo Nan barely remembered Yu Zheng's appearance. After a bit of comparison, Luo Nan was able to confirm that it was Yu Zheng. He was one of the 22 Phase 2 aberration infection targets that had been put on record. Yu Zheng's internal number was 14. He had been too focused on the big picture to notice this small detail. Luo Nan shook his head and directly spoke in the mission channel. "Brother Bamboo Pole, infected person number 14 is the Yu Zheng I had a dispute with last time at the Frost River Waterway flagship store." His father. Bamboo Pole immediately sent a message. "Yu Qi, chairman and major shareholder of Wuyue Pharmaceuticals. Yu Zheng is infected, so Yu Qi must know the inside story. Now that his emotions are unstable, it's likely that he won't be able to hold on much longer. If the branch doesn't want the situation to get out of hand, it's best to control it in advance." Bamboo Pole couldn't react for a moment. Luo Nan's wristband vibrated at this time. He looked at the caller ID and saw that it was actually Yu Qin who had sent a communication request. Luo Nan thought for a moment before accepting the call. "Hey, hello." There were clear sounds of breathing on the other side, and there were some noises. The one who spoke in the end wasn't Yu Qin, but a low and hoarse male voice. Luo Nan knew that this was Yu Qin's father, the Yu Qi he had just been discussing. Every word that Yu Qi uttered was dry, hoarse, and difficult. "Mr. Luo, I want to report something to you." Luo Nan didn't plan on chatting with this person. He simply responded, "Someone will contact you soon. Do your best for the sake of your children." Chapter 675. The elevator continued to go up, and Luo Nan looked at the jumping numbers on the panel. He suddenly asked, "Isn't it too easy?" Qin Ikuan and God looked at each other. They hesitated for a moment before Qin Ikuan responded, "Indeed." That person's mind collapsed just like that. "Mr. Luo, what did you do just now? Did you apply pressure locally?" "I didn't do anything, aside from the initial force. My previous plan was easily broken by someone, but now the answer popped out on its own. It was so easy." Qin Ikuan answered cautiously, "They're on different levels. The two suspects are both very powerful powers, and Mr. Yu is just an ordinary person." The so-called suspects were referring to Quantum Corporation and the Gene Exchange. Yu Qi, a successful person in society, clearly did not have the qualifications to compare with these two powers. Of course, they're on different levels. Luo Nan acknowledged this prerequisite. But then again, the two Order of Justice First Ablatums on the 177th floor weren't bad either, but they were quite anxious right now. And this was a situation where Luo Nan did not deliberately target them. In Luo Nan's eyes, the large living area was a region where his soul strength tyrannically interfered with. The thoughts, choices, and actions of the vast majority of people suddenly became special. It was simple. Had his eyesight and analysis improved? Luo Nan never believed that he had any talent in analyzing situations and peeling silk from cocoons. The reason why he had a feeling of simplicity was undoubtedly because the current situation had inexplicably become direct and clear. Just like the emergency notification that intensified the situation. Just like Yu Qi's display of mental defenses collapsing. Luo Nan knew that the most direct reason for this was the silent thundercloud that he had released into the mental domain of others. It was just as Bamboo Pole said. Quite a few of these fellows with ulterior motives had sunk into a state of brain hypoxia under the powerful pressure. They were at a loss of what to do, and most of them relied on their inferior instincts to do all sorts of absurd, ridiculous, and foolish actions. But were the two first oblatums of the Order of Justice suffering from brain hypoxia as well? Clearly not. But their actions were clearly affected, to the point where clear fluctuations appeared in their emotions and mental states. Their mental defenses, which were originally quite strict, silently cracked and cracked, exposing quite a few flaws for Luo Nan to exploit. The series of changes in the state of affairs made Luo Nan feel as if he had gained something. He seemed to have discovered a method, a new model, that was completely different from his previous failed designs. It could make up for, or at least bypass, the shortcomings of his strategic designs. That's right. Luo Nan had been brooding over his failure in the treatment room all this time. Victory had been so close at hand, but it had been forcefully cut off by someone. All of his previous efforts had been wasted, and this was a conditional lock that had been set up early on. It was like a noose, waiting for him to obediently step on it. Do you feel like your IQ is being crushed? Therefore, Luo Nan needed to make up for his mistakes. Aside from the interference waves that could be transmitted 2,000 kilometers away, he urgently wanted to make corrections to his own behavior. Luo Nan clenched his hand into a fist and lightly smacked his forehead. He tried to sort out the flashing and changing flaming tails of spiritual light in his mind. He wanted to find the most fundamental point of force. The elevator continued to ascend. Luo Nan knew that this journey would be smoother. As mentioned before, his perception covered the entire building. Under the premise of near omniscience, he could, of course, make predictions. This was Luo Nan's most accustomed way of thinking. It was also a kind of classic method. Observation, generalization, classification, corresponding consideration, and solution. He was used to being an observer. He was able to utilize the mental sensing network very well, maximizing the absorption of information, enriching the conditions, reducing the difficulty of making judgments, and increasing the precision. It was just like doing exercises. He was methodical, obtaining the correct answer. He was as rigorous and thorough as possible. However, errors would always appear. Especially with the expansion of the span of time and space, there would always be such and such accidents. Mechanical objects would have conflicts and malfunctions. The ever-changing human heart would always give people surprises. There would be gaps in one's own thinking when there were too many conditions to collect. Of course, he could observe more deeply, calculate more seriously, and expend more energy to reduce errors to the minimum. However, the changes of the world were not like taking the elevator and doing exercises. If he guessed wrong in the elevator, he would at most have to wait a bit longer. The exercises would forever lie in the exercises collection. If he was wrong, he could change it. If he couldn't, he could study it again. Dealing with the affairs of the world involved success and failure, life and death. It involved too many domains that he did not understand and did not delve deeply into. For example, the condition lock this time. The entire biochemical reactor, the design diagram of the parasitic monster, and the anatomical diagram were more or less placed before his eyes, but he still missed the condition lock. Even after the conclusion appeared, he still needed to spend a considerable amount of time to understand and guess. Only then would he be able to understand the mechanism of this ambush. If he were to encounter a similar situation again, would he have to learn and solve the problem step by step? Would he have to find all the conditions, analyze them clearly, establish a model, and verify them one by one? It was impossible. In the end, he wasn't an omniscient and omnipotent God. His mental sensing network and the processing mode of his brain were ultimately unable to encompass the entire world. This was a heavenly road that looked very beautiful, but countless traps and landmines were hidden on the road. The more he went forward, the more beautiful the scenery, but the greater the danger. In that case, was there a method that could effectively reduce the conditions and calculation requirements, allowing him to always be in the domain that he was most proficient in to handle problems with ease? I have a general idea. Luo Nan spoke abruptly, causing the two bodyguards beside him to only smile wryly. Luo Nan asked them a question at this time. Say, the 20,000 people of Aurora Cloud City right now. Which direction do you think they will go? What form will they take to leave? Qin Ikuan looked at God, and God looked at Qin Ikuan. The two politely pushed and pushed back a few times before Qin Ikuan replied awkwardly, I can't say for sure. But the method is probably the elevator. Then what will happen if Aurora Cloud City catches fire right now? Qin Ikuan couldn't continue. He just wanted to ask, Boss Luo, what are you doing? Luo Nan answered his own question, they will certainly call the police and flee. Under the guidance of the fire prevention system, people will no longer take the elevator. They will flee through the fire escape passageway. And if we clearly tell them that there is only one passageway that is unobstructed, then everyone, or at least the majority of people, will rush there. Even the most resolute of fellows will be affected by the surging tide of people. The situation becomes simple. The flow of people and their corresponding variables will be squeezed into a limited area, and it will be easier to take advantage of. Of course, this is just a guess. I haven't verified it yet. Verify your sister. The pressure on Qin Ikuan and God was like a mountain in an instant. Strands of coldness even seeped out from the back of their necks. It wasn't that they didn't have confidence in Luo Nan. It was that the young man before them displayed an extremely serious attitude. Truth be told, they really didn't know if Luo Nan, who had been immersed in his own logic, would really go and do a little experiment or something. He didn't even need to move his pinky finger to create a disaster that was 100 times more terrifying than a fire. Luo Nan felt the changes in the moods of the two bodyguards. Yes, this could be considered a sort of verification. When external forces forcefully intervened, even the numerous and complicated human hearts would be dissolved layer by layer. Only a few answers would remain. There were only a few limited instinctive modes for humans. It was just as Bamboo Pole said. Animalistic nature would dominate everything in the end. Of course, it was impossible to achieve perfection in the vast majority of situations, especially when facing a powerful enemy. But in the end, the train of thought was correct. Limit the domain. Limit the level. Limit the direction. Make things simple. And in order to accomplish all of this, one needed to actively intervene. Engaging in pure observation from beginning to end was a comprehensive, thorough, yet passive method. The sensing network that covered the entire world was just the first step to seize the initiative. Its clairvoyance was only temporary. If Luo Nan still used the thought process of doing exercises to solve practical problems, even if he had the support of the sensing network and was a step, 2, 3, or even 4 steps faster, he would still be in a passive position when competing with those fellows who had been operating for many years and had buried countless traps. The conditional format lock that gave him a hard slap in the face was the best example. Luo Nan's new train of thought was to go from being passive to being active. Then what should he do? What should he do in order to be more proactive in intervening and obtaining the best results? What should he do in order to have an effective effect on an ordinary person like Yu Qi? What should he do in order to have a substantial effect on an elite of the inner world like Li Taixing? Or even on the powerful people hiding behind Quantum Corporation and the Gene Exchange? Luo Nan wanted to continue pondering, but his wristband vibrated at this time, interrupting his train of thought. He glanced at the caller ID and the corner of his eyes twitched. He Donglu, this playboy. What the hell was he doing getting in on the action? Luo Nan didn't have the leisure to pay attention to this fellow. He simply refused the call and continued to ponder his own matters. He Donglu didn't disturb him any further. The elevator went all the way up, and it was just as Luo Nan had predicted. Practically no one cut in line. The elevator only stopped for the first time when it reached the 160th floor. Luo Nan furrowed his brows, and the smell of alcohol assailed his nostrils as the metal door opened. Surprise! He Donglu leaned against the edge of the elevator and suddenly leaned half his body over. He didn't care what sort of expression Luo Nan had and just laughed loudly. His face was scarlet red, and it was obvious that he was in a drunken state. Luo Nan wasn't scared. He just pondered whether or not he should let Qin Ikuan kick this brother out. And at this time, He Donglu gave him a thumbs up. Boss Luo, I heard that your esteemed self barged into the Caesar Club and kicked the balls of the Huang family's kid. This terrible party is lacking a man like you. Go go go. Let's go get high together. He slammed his head into the room as he spoke. He wasn't the only one. There were 5 or 6 other drunk men and women behind him. They followed in, laughing and laughing. Qin Ikuan looked at Luo Nan, and Luo Nan didn't have the impatience he had earlier. Instead, it was as if he had discovered something interesting. He sized up these people back and forth. He asked Donglu, "How did you know I was here?" Chapter 676. Let me introduce you. Everyone here is someone you can make friends with. Donglu acted as Luo Nan's introducer. He introduced the group of drunkards that came in with him to Luo Nan. Luo Nan didn't recognize these people. He didn't even remember the introductions. In any case, they were the sons and granddaughters of some big shot. He just discovered that Donglu's official female companion for tonight, the female celebrity Shi Wei, wasn't among them. Of course, these drunkards didn't recognize him. They were all laughing and giggling there. There was a gorgeous woman wearing nightclub makeup who directly reached out to touch Luo Nan's chest. Wow, Donglu, you actually hid such a little brother who abstinence. He didn't bring a female companion or a bodyguard to a party. What kind of business does little boss do? Move to the side. Are you looking for a beating? Donglu slapped away the nightclub girl's perverted claw without the slightest trace of politeness. But in the blink of an eye, he laughed mischievously. I'm not the one hiding people. It's my older sister. My older sister is Boss Luo's secretary. Your older sister? Which older sister? Donglu laughed again under Luo Nan's attentive gaze. The He family was a large family. There were 7 or 8 women of suitable age and unsuitable age. This was enough for these drunkards to guess blindly for a while. Actually, under the effects of alcohol and drugs, the logic of these drunkards had long since become dregs. This topic didn't persist for more than 20 seconds. It just stirred the elevator space into a chaotic mess, creating a foul atmosphere. Luo Nan didn't mind this sort of chaos. He watched everything with interest. He could see that this group of people were really relaxed. This seemed quite reasonable. After all, this was a carnival party. But the problem was that being able to be this relaxed in the current Aurora Cloud City, especially in this well-informed second-generation circle, was a very rare type. Rare and good. Luo Nan asked Donglu, "Your party is on the rooftop? Are there a lot of people?" The rooftop is just one of them. The weather is cold and the earth is frozen. There are also people who like indoor sports. Hey, what do you mean by, you? Donglu forcefully corrected Luo Nan's wrong position. He laughed as he grabbed Luo Nan's wrist. He probably wanted to show off the garbled dial on his wristband. But he soon suffered retribution. Luo Nan pulled his hand away in a bad mood. He grimaced in pain. He wasn't annoyed but laughed and said, "Since you're carrying this thing, you don't have to put up a memorial arch. I'll keep it a secret from my sister. Don't worry. I will introduce them to you. I know what you like. With Shi Wei around, we will know each other very well. It will definitely be safe." As he said that, he even leaned over, his breath reeking of alcohol. He lowered his voice and said mysteriously, "I know you know someone in the circle. Now that things are a mess, you should keep an eye on them. If you run into someone like that Huang brat again, who knows how many balls you'll have to break." He was probably referring to the BHD group or even Moya and the others. Luo Nan understood Donglu's superficial hints. He could also see the deeper thoughts of this fellow, who was watching a show and didn't mind the matter getting bigger. However, he still spent an extra 2 seconds and carefully observed once more. Only then did he finally confirm that Donglu truly didn't know what was happening outside. This one was more impressive. It must be known that Donglu and his group weren't ordinary commoners. This didn't mean that they were more precious than ordinary commoners. Rather, this group of people were undoubtedly in the vicinity of the core circle of tonight's storm. If they were still completely ignorant of the entire situation at this time, then Luo Nan would have to have a whole new level of respect for the ability of the government and the military to keep things secret. Of course, a person involved like Yu Zheng would certainly know a bit. Luo Nan wasn't completely clear about the arrangements in the end, nor was he interested. He just felt that this small, temporarily sealed circle was very suitable for him to verify a few things. Donglu was still pulling and tugging. Luo Nan looked at the jumping number of floors on the elevator panel and suddenly laughed. Is there a relatively quiet place over there? There is. There's too much. Donglu opened his mouth. Then let's go. Let's go take a look. A few minutes later, just as Donglu had promised, Luo Nan stood in a relatively quiet place. He looked down from high above, overlooking the entire rooftop. Actually, this place wasn't a part of the rooftop. It was a viewing room adjacent to it. The balcony on this side faced the rooftop directly. The angle and height were excellent. It was indeed the best place in the vicinity to have the best view. One could see the lustrous and dazzling scenery of the rooftop in its entirety. Currently, the rooftop was a rather lively area. There was a half-suspended sky swimming pool at the edge. The swimming pool could have been changed to a sealed structure in this season, but the group of people had requested that the entire swimming pool be exposed to the cold winds of the high altitude. As for the thermostatic system, it didn't exist. At most, it could maintain the level of not freezing the swimming pool. There was a row of swimsuit models lined up neatly by the side of the swimming pool. Each and every one of them had fair skin, long legs, and beautiful looks. But at the same time, their lips had turned blue from the cold. Yet they still had to keep their heads high and their chests out. Their dimples were like flowers. Next to her was a group of multimillionaires who had just lost a bet. They were forced to take off their clothes. They were left with only a pair of underpants. Some of them were even stripped naked. Then they screamed as they hugged a model by the side of the swimming pool. They were smashed into the pool with a splash. When all the models lined up at the edge of the swimming pool were thrown into the water, dozens of black and white flesh wantonly tossed and turned in the pool, moaning and screaming. The victors on the shore clapped their hands in celebration. The atmosphere was noisy, passionate, and absurd. The rooftop was very large. The sky swimming pool was just a corner of it. Needless to say, there were also people who weren't willing to suffer the cold. They were partying in other areas. Generally speaking, the atmosphere Luo Nan felt matched with the situation Donglu had revealed. Though there were indeed a portion of people who were restless and forced smiles, the overall situation was controllable. Luo Nan really did have a whole new level of respect for the military and the government. You won't be able to feel the atmosphere here. Young people don't need to be shy. You need to know how to blend into the environment. You don't need to worry about my sister. Do you want a drink? Donglu's words were stuck in his throat after being covered by Luo Nan's gaze. He automatically gave up on the old joke that had been used too many times. He went in dejectedly to fetch some wine. Luo Nan really didn't blend in. He didn't want to blend in. Right now, he was just playing the role of an observer. He carried out transcendental clairvoyance from a transcendent position. It seemed that he had returned to his old path of pure observation. This didn't conform to Luo Nan's previous awareness, but it was more in line with the general environment of Xia City. One fact was obvious: a better effect of secrecy represented a higher cost of secrecy. This was more proof of the resolute determination of Xia City's administration to maintain stability. There was also the Xia City branch. From the beginning of the incident until now, especially He Yuan's behavior of concealing over 10,000 suspected cases, Luo Nan couldn't deny that there was a consistent, low-key core within, even if he had the intention of fishing. Whether it was to maintain stability or to keep a low profile, to put it bluntly, it was to control the situation and handle things cautiously. No one was willing to blow things up. Perhaps it was just as Peony said. This was already a general trend that was moving toward political correctness. Prematurely handling things was tantamount to standing on the sidelines. It was very easy to fall into a dilemma. Some of these principles were Luo Nan's speculations, but most of them came from Bamboo Pole and the others in the mission channel, discussing and speaking over and over again. Luo Nan didn't really participate, but this kind of discussion was brainwashing. It was specifically designed to wash Boss Luo's brain. The silent thundercloud just now had left the administrators, who had been deliberately keeping a low profile and maintaining stability, in a very difficult situation. But now they could die in peace. Luo Nan had already stopped the silent thundercloud's oppressive posture. But if one were to insist on saying that Luo Nan cared about the overall situation, that might not be the case. From Luo Nan's own point of view, he just carried out a more technical reflection. The powerful oppression of the silent thundercloud created an effect similar to the brainless halo. It was far too crude on a technical level. Ordinary people like Yu Qi nearly lost control of their emotions. It didn't mean much to the truly strong. At the very least, Luo Nan didn't see any extraordinary jump up and down. Luo Nan's elbows pressed against the stone wall of the balcony as he gazed at the chaotic scene on the rooftop below. These people had their nerves numbed by alcohol and drugs. They were the few targets in the vicinity that weren't affected by the silent thundercloud. They were excellent test subjects. Luo Nan hoped to find an answer from their bodies. Was there a highly efficient structure and a corresponding entry point? Was there a way to turn one part of intervention into 10 parts of effectiveness? There was no doubt that Luo Nan's way of thinking was a type of configuration thinking. He naturally flipped through the virtual brain system's user manual, searching for an answer in this configuration dictionary. Of course, he also had his mother's research materials. But those materials leaned more towards basic designs and fragments. They weren't as mature and complete as the user manual. They could be directly used as examples. But this time, Luo Nan was disappointed. He flipped through the user manual, but he actually didn't find a single configuration example that was related to his current situation and requirements. Instead, there were quite a few related structures that could be used to break and reconstruct this negative aura. This didn't make sense. Luo Nan searched 2 times. In the end, he even flipped through the catalog bit by bit, but he didn't find anything. But half a month ago in class, when he first taught the blood intent ring, he also played around with the collective will. Oh, hold on. Luo Nan suddenly came to a realization. It didn't matter how he stirred the hearts of the people during the lecture. His ultimate goal was to eliminate all irrelevant disturbances and gather everyone's minds. He completed the process of accumulating the basic structure of the arc wedge from simple to complex. Finally, he built the fortress of the blood intent ring. That entire process could be said to be the gathering of everyone's wisdom. They eliminated all irrelevant emotional influences. It was a display of rationality. It was very different from the situation under the soundless thundercloud, where the turbid currents were surging. If he really wanted to find a suitable example, it would be the altar spiderweb that he had built earlier in order to deal with Ray when becoming a 2000th Mississippi. She was in a terrible situation where she was jittery at the slightest sound. However, it wasn't built upon the knowledge of the user manual. It was the Wraith sign. Hiss, this is interesting. The collective consciousness condensed in the fortress of the blood intent ring was the convergence of the light of reason. And this was the most fundamental meaning of configuration thinking. And the altar spider web was like what the Wraith sign had always done. It provoked the lower-level life instincts of humans. The winner announces, the loser withers away. It made the turbid flow of greed suppress the radiance of reason. It formed the desired form amidst the chaos and ignorance. It flowed in the desired direction. Of course, Luo Nan believed that if he forcefully controlled it, the Wraith sign's ability would be able to turn it in a positive direction. But as the saying goes, the human heart is up, and the human nature is down. The smoothest effect was still to go down. This already belonged to the category of human nature. One was up, one was down. Chapter 677. The Virtual Brain System and the Wraith Sign System. Let's put it this way for now. From Luo Nan's standpoint, there was no meaning in deliberately distinguishing the two. It didn't matter how different their philosophies were. It was fine as long as he could use them. The combination of the two expanded a domain that the other could not reach. One could go up or down, one could ascend to heaven or enter hell. What was so bad about this? What truly needed to be paid attention to was the problem of how to combine the two. It was also the technical problem of concrete application. There was a practical situation. Rationality had a scale. It was very hard to set a ruler for emotions or emotional instincts. It was just like how Luo Nan was able to teach over 1,000 people the same knowledge in class half a month ago. He went from shallow to deep and built a complex and grand fortress of the ring of blood and will. It was true that the ruler of the mental plane was very hard to grasp. However, the continuous stacking configuration design of the fortress cleverly solved this problem. And as the 1,000 people continued to work together, their knowledge and understanding of the structure of the fortress gradually converged, forming the greatest common divisor. This was the advantage of rationality. In this aspect, the emotional instincts had an irreparable flaw. They had too many variables and were too unstable. It was very hard to use a ruler of rationality on them. Once a ruler was used, emotions could no longer be called emotions. The most fatal thing was that the gathering of turbid currents of emotions could easily go to extremes. Extremes represented loss of control. They represented the end of change. Any dynamic system that went to extremes would be a disaster. It was like a large living area covered by a silent thundercloud. The accumulation of emotions of fear could crush a successful person like Yu Qi to the point of collapse. It looked like the results were pretty good, but from the perspective of configuration thinking, this represented the destruction of the pressure transmission channel. There wasn't even a pot to boil. How could water be boiled? The distance between the lower levels and the higher levels was too far. The transmission wasn't smooth, so there was no way to talk about accumulation. So Luo Nan didn't need to wait until the very end to know that even if Yu Qi and the others were all scared to death, they wouldn't be able to touch a single hair of the mastermind behind the scenes. Luo Nan held onto the railing of the balcony. His gaze swept over the rooftop over and over again. From his perspective, this group of men and women who were partying and indulging in debauchery had some homogenization tendencies under these circumstances. But when he carefully examined the human heart, he found that it was full of colors. Tributaries and whirlpools were everywhere. There was a large amount of usable elements. If he simply used power to suppress them and make them converge into one, it would become a beginner game of size. There was no technique to speak of, and there was no meaning in thinking. Was there really no other way? That might not be the case. Luo Nan knocked on the railing, and his thoughts formed amidst the popping sounds. He cast himself into the even more distant depths of the mental space. On a plane that almost no one could reach, the strange and bewitching Darksider species responded. It slowly stretched out its limbs and its 6 eyes flickered with an extraordinary splendor. At this moment, the Wraith sign was actually far away in the cloud world. Luo Nan had been using it to guard that place all this time, to monitor the opening of the palace, and to serve as the hub for the transportation of time and space. It was the safest and most suitable for emergencies. However, on the plane of the polar domain, Luo Nan's connection with the Wraith sign wasn't hindered by Renku. Luo Nan wasn't prepared to transfer this fellow back. He just issued a special command. Luo Nan's eyes lit up a few seconds later. Countless threads of light crisscrossed in the depths of the void. They converged and weaved layer upon layer to construct a boundless and deep spider web. Blood flowed on every strand of spider silk. The ends could not be seen, and it was unknown where the blood flowed to in the end. This was the altar spider web constructed by the Wraith sign. Back then, the Wraith sign had used 2 days and 2 nights to practically crawl through every corner of Xia City and its surroundings in order to deal with the dangerous situation caused by the incident with the 2000th miss. It didn't matter if it was an ability user or a normal person. It didn't matter if it was an important member of the military or government, or if it was a capital power. All parties involved. There was certainly a considerable portion of innocent people who were caught in the crossfire. As long as they could be infiltrated, they were glued together by the spider silk. They were pulled into this numerous and complicated network. This was a network system that Luo Nan had provided the creativity and format framework. The Wraith sign had constructed layer upon layer of a network system. Its internal operating mechanism was undoubtedly driven by the turbid flow of human desires. Rui Wen's value was the inducement, and the internal mechanism of the winner takes all, the loser wither and die, provided unending support. Right now, the spiderweb system was a bit desolate. After all, the incident with the 2000th miss had already passed. Those bounty hunters who were driven by greed and tried to sneak into Xia City to make a fortune had all scattered like birds and beasts. Without a clear goal, a competitive relationship could not be formed. There was no environment of the winner takes all, the loser wither and die. But Luo Nan remembered that the operation of the altar spider web was extremely good during that period of time. Extreme situations did not appear. Why was it like this? The answer was actually very simple. This system did not avoid the drawbacks of extreme emotions. On the contrary, it used this characteristic wantonly. The altar spiderweb system was like a net-like topological structure. Large amounts of nodes were connected to each other. They interacted with each other, but they did not possess any special characteristics. The failure of a single node or a portion of a node would not affect the altar spiderweb system at all. The winner takes all, the loser wither and die. This principle was established on the basis of millions of similar nodes. When a single node or a portion of a node exploded with extreme emotions, the value of the node would be seized to the greatest limit. The other nodes would divide and consume the value, and then they would be discarded. The method was simple and crude, but it avoided the negative effects of the spread of extreme emotions to the greatest limit. And the open system ensured that new nodes would constantly join in. To put it a bit more extreme, this system could continue to operate as long as the people of Earth did not die. It could endlessly change the target of greed, induce people to kill each other, and continue to accumulate power without end. From Luo Nan's current perspective, it was undoubtedly the most suitable construction method for the turbid flow of emotions. It was even possible to use the altar spiderweb right now. In fact, the vast majority of people present were stuck to the spiderweb. All it took was a command to open it. But there was something that needed to be said one more time. It was far too crude. Even though Luo Nan's thoughts were purely theoretical, he was still a bit afraid of this vicious logic of life and death. If he were to use the group of people on the rooftop as an experiment, he would have to let them kill each other in order to optimize the configuration of their life force. Well, although the vast majority of the things on the rooftop weren't anything good, using this sort of method, wouldn't it look a bit ugly? Plus, the extremes of the control methods ensured that the system was not extreme. This would imperceptibly suppress the system's automatic regulation function. It still could not be considered a qualified dynamic system. Here comes the wine. Fineo 72, one of the first batch of wineries to be rebuilt after the war. In any case, it's just a drinking scene. Dong Lu pulled out a bottle of expensive red wine from God knows where and presented it like a treasure. In the end, he tried his best to act cool. However, the monkey butt face caused by alcohol greatly reduced the effect. Luonan didn't turn around. This brother braced himself and moved closer, following Luonan's line of sight to look outside. He was misdirected, believing that Luo Nan was looking at the spring scenery in the pool. He took advantage of the alcohol to laugh out loud. Don't worry about that. Those maggots in the pool. Don't look at how they're usually lecherous and hungry. But with this weather and this water temperature, they're definitely caterpillars right now. Do you think they're like that? They don't really look like it. Luo Nan rarely chatted with Dong Lu ever since he arrived on the rooftop. Dong Lu was stimulated, and his mouth became more and more unrestrained. It's just that this wine isn't strong enough. Let's change it to high-quality grain wine. Our traditional Sharaozi and Erguotu will warm up the body. Your brother will go down and give you a demonstration. Thinking back, I trained in the Coastal Defense Force for 2 months. I lay on the ice and lay in the snow in the middle of winter, and I charged into the sea naked. Luo Nan didn't need to examine Dong Lu on the mental plane to know that his words weren't entirely true. However, Luo Nan's current interest wasn't here. He casually swirled the red wine glass in his hand as he looked at the loser dogs in the pool who were howling strangely. They were doing everything they could to climb up to the shore of the pool, but they were kicked down by their bad-hearted companions and pulled down. The pool by the shore was filled with screams and curses. Even if there was a beauty by their side, who would have the leisure to toss and turn? Luo Nan watched a few rounds and suddenly had some thoughts. The material determines the consciousness. The reason why human desires are stubborn is because they are rooted in the fundamental needs of the body. If there's no material foundation, the corresponding desires will be greatly reduced. Therefore, I still need to attack from the material plane. I don't need to be too bloody. Sometimes, a ladle of cold water is enough. Depolarization, or in other words, sage time. Luo Nan slapped the railing. Using the wraith sign to seize the essence of others, this line of thought was feasible in terms of structure. It was more inclined toward a normal configuration design. However, the problem of the ruler was not solved. Opening the line of thought of depolarization was like finding a buffer method. He carved a mark on the ruler, but this was still not enough. It was far from enough. Donglu, who was next to Luo Nan, couldn't help but roll his eyes when he saw Luo Nan pondering over there. He took the initiative to clink glasses with Luo Nan and indicated to Luo Nan to experience something more interesting. It would be a pity if you didn't find a few prey in such a good position. Speaking of which, there are a lot of girls staring at the two of us standing here. Believe it or not. Hey, that one. Donglu scanned the target. Look, the one with the sapphire blue dress. Wow, it's the most suitable color scheme for fair skin and beautiful looks. It's practically glowing. Haven't you noticed? She's already scanned over here quite a few times in this period of time. Who do you think her prey is? Luo Nan didn't mind Donglu disturbing his train of thought with his previous gains. He actually hoped that this fellow could give him some more inspiration. He looked over according to Donglu's words and saw a familiar face. Fei Jin. Hey, you know her? Sort of. The lady on the rooftop noticed Luo Nan's line of sight as they spoke. She smiled and raised her cup, greeting him from afar. Damn, it really is you. Hurry up and raise your cup. Where's your manners? Donglu urged Luo Nan over and over again. He hated that he couldn't reach out and help Luo Nan raise his cup. Luo Nan curled his lips. In the end, he still raised his cup and drank a mouthful of the slightly astringent wine. Chapter 678. Donglu whistled. He forgot himself and simply extended his elbow to rest on Luo Nan's shoulder. I dare to bet that he's definitely looking for you. Don't worry. Alcohol, medicine, oil, and all sorts of equipment are available here. Do you want me to guide you on the spot? Luo Nan just stared at him, not letting him go until this fellow stuffed his mouth with a wine cup. At this point, Donglu's thoughts of taking advantage of the alcohol had been beaten away. He was a bit listless, but he still forced his way over to Luo Nan's side. He spoke to Luo Nan here and there, speaking some random words. Donglu did his best, but Luo Nan's response was always indifferent. This made Donglu feel rather defeated. Little did he know that Luo Nan was currently observing him with interest. For the sake of finding inspiration, Luo Nan had been observing the deep structure of the turbid flow of the human heart from various angles and levels, such as the altar and the spider web. Donglu was also a window. Most of the people around the rooftop were in chaos. They were like molecules moving in a disorderly manner, without direction. This was very normal. Even if they weren't chaotic normally, they would certainly be chaotic under the effects of alcohol and drugs. Donglu himself was also in a mess, but upon closer examination, this bro's words and actions clearly displayed a pattern. Was Donglu really drunk? This couldn't be faked, but even in this state, he still instinctively closed the distance between him and Luo Nan. He feared Luo Nan's reaction, and he made timely adjustments. Let's not talk about how clumsy he was. On the other hand, his companions, such as the chest-touching woman in the elevator, had no misgivings in their actions and words. After arriving on the rooftop, they just let themselves go, disappearing without a trace. They were much more free than Donglu. In terms of family background, Donglu was a level stronger than his dog meat friends. In terms of personality, from his early performance, this bro was a perverse person. He was absolutely not someone who was easy to deal with. Then, why did such a contrast appear? The difference was that Donglu knew what sort of person Luo Nan was and what sort of energy he possessed. On the other hand, his gang of scoundrels knew absolutely nothing about Luo Nan. Luo Nan was a ruler. However, this standard wasn't objective. It was reflected in various forms in the hearts of different people. These people used the Luo Nan ruler within their own understanding to measure and control their own actions. If Luo Nan weighed heavily in someone's heart and was a great threat, then the ability to mutate that person's behavior and consciousness would be stronger. On the other hand, if Luo Nan didn't weigh much in someone's heart, to the point that they didn't even have an impression of him, then it wouldn't be considered a mutation or an influence. To put it bluntly, it was an instinct to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages. Donglu's performance was a typical example, but it wasn't the most intense. Luo Nan recalled the situation when he first appeared on this balcony. He seemed to be able to hear quite a few people wailing in their hearts on the balcony. Using oneself as a ruler, it was quite interesting to make a horizontal comparison. Then again, what was Luo Nan really going to do to certain people? The soundless thundercloud had already stopped, and he didn't make any further moves. However, the human mind's imagination and deductive ability were very developed, especially in a tense state. Even an elite of the Order of Justice like Li Taixing was not immune to this. It was inevitable that he would exaggerate and deform. In this way, what they were fighting against was no longer the real Luo Nan. Instead, it was the Luo Nan ruler that Luo Nan had projected into their minds. It was an illusory image and situation. It was a demonic shadow that they could not grasp and see through. From start to finish, Luo Nan did nothing more than exert an initial pressure, awakening the Luo Nan ruler in everyone's hearts and giving them a negative vector. Then, the human mind naturally continued to operate and communicate, endlessly expanding the scale and rendering the influence. In the end, it converged into a destructive tide of filth. Of course, other rulers could be used in the operation of the real world. Money, beauty, power, they were all examples. Back when Luo Nan constructed the altar network during the 2000th Miss incident, didn't he use Rui Wen as a ruler? But how could these things be easier to control than oneself? Simply speaking, Luo Nan just needed to control himself. He could use his own happiness and anger to affect the happiness and anger of others. He could interfere with the choices of others. Within the network of the human mind formed by social relationships, everything was logical and logical. When the target was greedy, he would release the bait. When the target was angry, he would give the stimulation. When the target was fearful, he would use strong pressure. Luo Nan himself was a regulator. With the existence of the Wraith sign and its Wraith sign system, he could easily interfere with the mental world of the vast majority of people. He could accurately transmit information. This made it easier to expand and contract the Luo Nan ruler and influence the actions of those people. It could be as direct and crude as the silent thundercloud, or it could be indirect and tactful. He could guarantee the stability, sensitivity, and precision needed to take the initiative to the greatest extent. Yes, this was the active intervention technique that Luo Nan needed. It was the correct logic of 10 times the effort is worth 10 times the effort. As long as it was someone who knew me, it was impossible for them to not be affected by this intervention. This was a hurdle that could not be crossed in the face of an enemy. This gave Luo Nan the opportunity to control and influence. Anyone under the heavens who knows me will be weighed by me. The corner of Luo Nan's lips curled up. He nodded in all seriousness. That's a good way of putting it. You really want to instruct me on the spot? Donglu was about to be smacked silly by the Luo Nan ruler. He was completely unaware that an enormous disparity had already appeared in the direction of the two's thinking. The difference in the level of thinking could even be counted in light years. Luo Nan laughed as he patted Donglu's shoulder. Get lost. Right now, Luo Nan needed some peaceful space. After his basic train of thought was clear, he needed to properly think about the framework and practical operational problems. He still considered using the altar's spiderweb as a basic framework, but he no longer played it to the extreme. In terms of methods to guide the turbid flow of emotions, he slightly floated up from the level of soul-searching and life-seizing. He borrowed the network to extract a person's essence energy, affect the state of the fleshly body, and form a valve for emotional control. As the core medium, Luonan's Luonan ruler would accurately and effectively transmit information and correct the state of the nodes. Of course, this was a comprehensive project. The more precise control was needed, the more technical problems would be encountered. For example, purely absorbing a person's essence energy required not only the wraith sign, but it also required an accurate grasp of the body's structure and state. Right now, the knowledge of the root receptacle, root nature, and root trigger that he learned from Gym Master Shio could be put to use. All of these required constant adjustments. Luonan didn't expect to be able to solve the problem with just a few thoughts. It just so happened that he could perform a few observations and small experiments on the lively and restless rooftop. Luonan was already a bit impatient. He had even mobilized the external neuron to form a virtual workspace. He began to work accurately and immediately. Donglu was really stupefied. He didn't understand the young man in front of him at all. What was up with him fiddling with the virtual workspace and doing drawing homework at the slightest disagreement? Oh, he heard that Luonan's sketching skills were superb. Could it be that a beauty was about to arrive and he was preparing to draw as a souvenir? Then he suddenly came to a realization. No matter what angle he understood it from, Luonan's words really meant that he wanted him to get lost. Young master, he was extremely embarrassed for a time. There was a knock on the door just as he was in a daze. Donglu immediately grabbed the lifesaver that helped him out of this predicament. He placed his wine glass to the side and laughed out loud. The time to honor the bet has come. It's definitely that. What's it called again? He was about to move to open the door as he spoke, but he was grabbed by the arm just as his feet moved. He looked back in shock and saw Luonan reach out to grab him. Luonan shook his head slightly. Wait a moment. What's wrong? The ruler that should be there is gone. Donglu subconsciously looked at the virtual workspace. He was dazzled by all the operating tools on the toolbar over there. Only the heavens knew where the ruler was. Fei Jin stood outside the door, quietly waiting. Several dozen kilometers away, Inla took a deep breath. A virtual workspace was projected in front of her as well. Large amounts of analytical diagrams were drawn on it. These were the results of her hard work over the past few days. They were the most detailed analysis of the target she was about to meet. Right now, it was time to verify it. Actually, Inlu was very hesitant in her heart. With Fei Jin's outer shell, it didn't match her persona if she didn't greet or get close to Luonan when she saw him in the middle of an event. But if she were to rashly approach him, especially after the incident just now, it would truly be extremely dangerous. She had to admit that she was shocked by the might of the silent thundercloud. Yin Li's eyes focused on a series of analytical diagrams. Starting from the analysis of the personality mask, Luonan had 3 types of relatively common personality masks. They were the mask of weakness used to face his family, the mask of strength used to face the environment of the inner world, and the mask of ideology that occupied a dominant position in his personality. The silent thundercloud wreaked havoc was undoubtedly triggered by the mask of strength. According to the pieced-together intelligence, Inlu roughly knew that a mutant infection had occurred, and it was related to Quantum Corporation. This sort of thing had already happened once in Xia City. Luonan had seen through it and promptly dealt with it. It was said that an extraordinary had personally made a move against Luonan. Clearly, a death grudge had already been formed. At that time, the Blood Flame Order had already been expelled from Xia City. They were cleaning up the mess in D City, so they didn't have a deep understanding of the details of the situation. They didn't have complete intelligence right now. But in terms of the nature of the situation, since it involved the level of the inner world, the mask of strength was quite normal. However, Inlu noticed that the effects of the silent thundercloud were far too wide. Even a normal person who knew nothing about extraordinary powers would feel uncomfortable when faced with this invisible pressure. Only the drunkards on the rooftop would ignore the effects and laugh and giggle. Analyzing Luonan's personality, His mask of strength and mask of weakness had a clear direction. It manifested itself in a rapid and unforeseen switch. But once the scope of the attack expanded, the mask of ideology would often surface. This was because Luo Nan was mostly pondering over complex and abstruse theories at this time. He was verifying his thoughts, his studies, and his gains. He had forgotten himself, so how could he care about whether or not other people would be caught in the crossfire? It was even possible that Luo Nan was intentionally conducting experiments. Luo Nan was capable of doing such a thing under the mask of ideology. According to the intelligence, Luo Nan possessed a keen insight that ordinary people were unable to understand. Now that he had delivered himself to the door, the uncertainties were too high. Was his decision too hasty? Chapter 679. Lady Halder closed her eyes slightly and her body swayed slightly. It seemed that she was tired of the night and had already fallen asleep. But Lu remembered very clearly that when she was hesitating just now, it was Mrs. Halder who had told her, "Controlling the distance doesn't mean much to Luo Nan, but it is indispensable to us. Luo Nan has noticed you. Perhaps he has already completed his analysis, but you don't know anything about his current situation. So what's the point of avoiding him?" His boss's attitude was calm as usual, but the meaning behind his words was a little strange. Ever since that night when he analyzed the mask, Lu couldn't figure out what was going on. No matter what, she had already knocked on the door, and Lu had no other choice. She could only comfort herself by saying, "It's just a shell company that's taking the lead now. At worst, I'll just give up some funds and escape." A few seconds later, the door opened. The one who opened the door was Luo Nan's bodyguard. There was also a young man who was forcefully pushed out. According to the intelligence, this was the young master of the He family. He and Luo Nan had been on the balcony when the two sides had met face to face. But now it looked like they had been expelled from the country. There was a moment of chaos at the entrance. Fei Jin didn't even have the chance to say the words she had prepared for her. She was led into the room by the bodyguard in a daze, and the door was immediately closed. He Donglo's disorderly shouts could still be heard from outside. Lu quickly adjusted her state of mind. At this time, the lighting in the room and the dazzling lights on the rooftop reflected Luo Nan's figure in the depths of Fei Jin's pupils. This 16-year-old boy was leaning against the railing of the balcony, facing her. Coincidentally, a virtual workspace was projected in front of him. It was similar to the one Lu was using, but there was more white space on it. There were only some messy lines in the center, but he couldn't see the outline of it. This verified Li's judgment, but it wasn't a good thing for her. Right now, Luo Nan was under the guidance of the mask of rationality. He was in a working state, and he was in the most troublesome and dangerous state. Lu was extremely careful. She strictly followed the plan and gave Fei Jin a weak stimulation to her self-awareness. She let Fei Jin communicate with Luo Nan in her most accustomed state. Fei Jin was a woman who was very good at making use of her assets. After a long period of working and living, she had developed a set of communication skills that were engraved in her instincts. She smiled faintly, erasing all the edges and corners, showing the proper humility and respect. Yet, he crossed the line in the way he addressed her. "Junior Luo, can this woman still live?" Luo Nan's abrupt words instantly jumped out of Fei Jin's instincts and Li's preset context. Luo Nan's thoughts staggered, causing Fei Jin, who was at the scene, and Lu, who was dozens of kilometers away, to be stunned for half a second. Lu finally understood the true meaning of Luo Nan's words in this half a second. In that instant, Lu felt as if she had been pierced by a sharp blade that pierced through her heart. However, before the blood from the pain and panic could flow out, it was replaced with emptiness. Luo Nan allowed Fei Jin and the controller behind her to stare blankly. His hands did not stop moving. He continued to draw gentle and unfurl lines in the virtual work area. The blurry outline from before was more or less revealed within a short few seconds. This was a sketch with Fei Jin as the model. Luo Nan used the technique of combining lines and surfaces. His many years of skill made this work of art simple and vivid. It basically displayed Fei Jin's appearance and characteristics, accurately capturing the astonished expression on her face. Then, he borrowed the contrast between light and dark to draw out some meaning beyond the drawing. Luo Nan was very satisfied with this work. Aside from his drawing skills, there were some lines within the drawing that formed the life sketch on a level that no one else understood. They were actually the connecting lines of the stars that formed the life sketch. They flickered within Luo Nan's living starry sky, revealing the core mysteries of life that belonged to Fei Jin. There was also a portion that involved the structure of the altar's spiderweb. Fei Jin belonged to the altar's spiderweb. At the very least, she belonged to the nodes of the altar's spiderweb. Today's situation provided excellent reference material for researching the damage and changes of the nodes. As for the newest and most important drawing, it still belonged to Luo Nanqi. Unfortunately, it was already a wreckage. It was simply not complete. Luo Nan stopped drawing. In these few seconds, he had already dissected the woman before his eyes from the structure of her body and soul, the turbid flow of her emotions, the spiderweb nodes, and many other aspects. Elements that should be there, but weren't there. Elements that shouldn't be there, but were there, naturally appeared before his eyes. Her appearance was so contradictory. How could one believe that the woman before their eyes was a complete Fei Jin? Luo Nan suddenly felt a bit of regret. He should have used this person observation technique on Li Yiwei earlier. Even if he was unable to see through the preset mechanism of the conditional format lock, he would still be able to grasp more detailed information from the side, allowing him to apply it to the target location 2,000 kilometers away. It's never too late to mend the pen after the sheep is lost. Wait a minute. Did he complicate the problem again? Just when would this accumulation of layers and layers come to an end? Luo Nan thought of the great project of remodeling the structure of his mental senses that he was currently undertaking. He could not help but sigh. Only now did he truly raise his eyes to look at Fei Jin, who stood stupidly in the living room. His gaze pierced through her pupils, touching upon the consciousness hidden in the depths of her mind. Several dozen kilometers away, Yinlu finally reacted with great difficulty. But she directly felt Luo Nan's calm and clear gaze from Fei Jin. Her heart thumped loudly for a time, shaking her chest, throat, and even the space between her lips and teeth. Such a scene was simply like a thriller, but it was much more vivid than the vast expanse of emptiness that seemed to be facing death. Escape! This was the first thought that popped into Yin Li's mind after she recovered her normal thoughts. Of course, she had considered the extreme situation of her shell company being knocked open. She had made the relevant contingency plans. Even though she never thought that her shell company would collapse this quickly, she understood that the most important thing right now was to cut off this thread. Yinlu did not even bother to ask her boss for instructions. Her thoughts stirred, and she wanted to forcefully sever the connection between Fei Jin and the Blood Soul Temple of the Yiyuan district. However, her actions on the mental plane actually did not produce any effect. She invisibly melted away. At the same time, over at Aurora Cloud City, Fei Jin, who was standing in the middle of the room, spoke. Affected by the forced attachment of her soul, this person will certainly need some time to recuperate in order to recover from the damage related to the mutation of her neuronal structure. The probability of mental illness appearing in the future will be on the higher side. I apologize for using this method to meet you, Mr. Luo. I'm Mei Li Halt. Yinlu froze. And over at Aurora Cloud City several dozen kilometers away, Qin Ikuin and God, who had been confused by Luo Nan's abrupt words, heard the name that came out of Fei Jin's mouth. They used about 1/10 of a second to understand the contradictions and errors within, and then they straightened their bodies. Qin Ikuin cried out involuntarily, "Mrs. Halder." In the end, Fei Jin's foundation was good. Even though she was just a mouthpiece, she still perfectly embodied the corresponding bearing. She didn't pay any attention to the astonished emotions of the two bodyguards. She maintained a dignified and steady posture as she looked straight at Luo Nan. "Can we have a private space to talk?" "Mr. Luo." Qin Ikuin immediately dissuaded him. In fact, he was already reporting this latest situation to He Yueyin. On the balcony, Luo Nan spun his digital pen. His expression didn't change, but his eyes were filled with interest. He really wanted to add a few more strokes to the sketches in the work area right now. He wanted to display the new characteristics of Fei Jin and make his own work even more perfect. Let's just forget about it. There's no end to the layers. Yeah, I'm saying that you don't need to mind. Of course you can. Luo Nan indicated to Fei Jin that she could directly come to the balcony. Then he smiled at the two bodyguards. The mouthpiece isn't a threat. It can't smash people to death. Fei Jin had already slowly stepped onto the balcony as he spoke. The intense cold wind from high up in the sky welcomed her face, stirring her hair. She was so vivid that she seemed like a painting once more. Luo Nan merely snapped his fingers, and the AI butler closed the glass door, separating the balcony from the main hall of the room. It formed a semi-private space that was better than nothing. Someone blew a sharp whistle from below the balcony at this time. He Donglu had already moved to the balcony. He found a suitable angle to look over, looking like he was ready to properly appreciate and cheer. This fellow's actions brought about a hoot from a group of people. The surrounding environment was quite noisy for a time. Luo Nan shook his head. Actually, there's no need to go through so much trouble. There's no point in adding another segment. I know you, Mrs. Halder and Manager Een. Long time no see. Boom. Een Lee's heart suddenly throbbed, so much so that her body trembled. It wasn't just because of Luo Nan's greeting. It was also because the channel through which this greeting was transmitted bypassed Fei Jin. It was the most incisive and direct method to reverberate on the mental plane. At this very moment, Een Lu inexplicably recalled Luo Nan's world-shaking speech from half a month ago. She had studied the relevant video over and over again during this time. She had practically memorized every detail, and there was a paragraph that Luo Nan had said when he announced the cage hypothesis and denied the classical theory of the three belts. When I engraved a mark in your domain, I made direct contact with you. I violated you. I took the initiative to violate you, and you passively endured it. Een Lu had once seriously imagined and discussed with her boss. She had experimented with this situation, but when this situation entered the plane of reality and reappeared on her body, she discovered that she wasn't prepared at all. Was it humiliation? Of course it was humiliation. But she was even more unable to conceal her shock and even fear. A certain basic concept of space appeared, 80 kilometers. Een Lu and Mrs. Halder's temporary residence was located at the junction of Dongqing District and Waterfront District. It was over 80 kilometers away from the Pingjiang district where Aurora Cloud City was located. Een Lee's mind was a bit absent-minded. For a time, she wasn't too clear on the true meaning of this distance. She subconsciously looked at Mrs. Halder, who was sitting on the rocking chair. She remembered that her boss seemed to have said something about distance. Now it was a prophecy. It was only now that Mrs. Halder slowly opened her eyes. She swept an indifferent gaze over Een Lu, but she didn't express anything else. At the very least, this was how it looked on the surface. The problem was that Een Lu had followed Mrs. Halder for many years. How could she not know the information contained within her boss's micro-expressions? Een Lee's mind became clear on the direction of her boss's gaze, and her mind became clear and cold. Chapter 680. Een Lee's fingers and the tips of her feet were a bit cold and stiff. She forced herself not to look at the interface of the work area. At the same time, she used telepathic control to gradually fade out the switching mode. She did her best to hide an irrelevant diagram and data to the forefront. This process went quite smoothly. At the very least, Luo Nan didn't expose her. Perhaps he didn't discover it? But that person's telepathic thoughts continued to tap on their mental plane without end, forming a clear message. Why are you looking for me? What do you want to talk about? Luo Nan's reasonable inquiry seemed to be played down. He didn't use much effort, but this method was the most inconceivable of pressures. Een Lu suddenly realized the hidden meaning behind Luo Nan's method of communicating across space. 80 kilometers. Perhaps there were a few psychic extraordinaries in the world who could cover the range of their attacks up to this point. They could even increase their attack range by 10 times, 20 times. but they were certainly formed by borrowing the turbulent storm of the abyssal region's configuration. They would certainly leave behind corresponding traces. Relying on the Blood Soul Temple, which was solidified in the abyssal region, to block the storm was one thing. Whether or not there was a warning was another. The Blood Soul Temple did not respond at all when Luo Nan's telepathic thoughts entered. Either Luo Nan's ability to control the turbulent storm of the abyssal region had reached the acme of perfection, far surpassing the level of the vast majority of extraordinaries in the world, far surpassing the level of the Blood Soul Temple, or he didn't use the abyssal region at all. He relied on pure soul strength to cover his own mental network in this region, capturing the mental domains of the two first ablatums of the Blood Flame Order and effectively interfering with them. No matter what the result was, it possessed a terrifying might that shattered common sense. It was precisely Yin Li's understanding that caused this might to manifest. It was as if dark thunderclouds converged to press down on her mind. This was even more suffocating than what she experienced in the Aurora Cloud capital. Unknowingly, the chill from Yin Li's fingers and toes had already seeped up her spine. Half of her back was drenched in cold sweat. A thin layer of sweat seeped out. Mrs. Halder's voice rang out in a timely manner at this time. She no longer used Fei Jin's meaningless channel. She spoke as if she was chatting normally. We wish to ask Mr. Luo about the origins of the mound of bones in the sea outside of Xia City. Yin Li gaped, but no sound came out. It was purely an instinctive reaction of unease. Lady Halder's words struck the most sensitive part. This should have been the ultimate goal of their roundabout investigation. Well, there was no longer any room for roundabout investigation. On the mental plane, Luo Nan's answer was simple and direct. I have no reason to explain it to you. Then, Mr. Luo, what you're implying is that there is nothing wrong with our request for release, and it's all up to you whether you want to explain or not. Yin Li bit her lower lip. Lady Halder's tone was very calm, but in reality, she was using sophistry to forcefully fight for space under Luo Nan's pressure. This was something he couldn't do no matter what. She rocked back and forth in her chair. Madame Halder's body language was very relaxed. She had a smile on her face, and she even had the leisure to adjust the position of her crossed legs. Then please allow me to draw a preliminary conclusion. The Hill of Bones in the outer seas of Xia City, which may be the key to killing Jin Tong, is constructed according to the fundamental secret technique of my order, the Blood Soul Temple. Mr. Luo, through some kind of method, you have mastered this strange technique that even I, the first ablatum, cannot achieve. Your talent is truly admirable and enviable. Over at Aurora Cloud City, Luo Nan's lips twitched. He had peeped many times at Madame Halder's performance as she grasped the entire situation. He was no longer amazed, but he still wasn't easy to deal with. He had already placed the Luo Nan ruler in Yin Li's mind, causing it to rapidly expand and pry open the defenses of her mind. Collapse was only a matter of time. However, Madame Halder was able to control the waves in her mind quite well. The ruler was indeed permeating, but the prying strength was not obvious. Luo Nan had long since prepared himself for the ruthlessness of her decision and the sharpness of her words. He was not angry. He completely abandoned Fei Jin, who only knew how to pose, and continued to try to control the expansion and contraction of the Luo Nan ruler. He also wanted to hear what Madame Halder had to say next. The signature dish of our family has been served to the table by the chef of another family. When encountering such a thing, it is hard for one's heart to remain calm. Of course, Mr. Luo, you can use it to kill Jin Tong. This ability already exceeds the limits of the Blood Soul Temple. No matter how you look at it, it doesn't seem like you obtained it from our shabby order. Your actions are righteous. You stand upright. You don't need to give us any explanation. Madame Halder smiled in self-mockery. She was clearly speaking to the air, but it was like a monologue of a famous actor. It was vivid and natural. Several dozen kilometers away, Luo Nan's face heated up a bit. Madame Halder's words seemed to stand on Luo Nan's side. She spoke in an extremely humble manner, but there were clearly sharp thorns hidden within. At least this was what Luo Nan heard. The Blood Soul Temple was a secret technique that Luo Nan had obtained from the Blood Flame Order. The root of the technique was that the wraith sign had come to occupy the nest of the wraith sign when Emo Lun had forcefully seized Jack's remnant soul to nourish his face arachnid. The blood flame order didn't really do anything to Luo Nan from then on. They just obediently grew up. They were completely unaware that their hard work of hurting the wraith sign had gone to great lengths. What was originally a small enmity was compounded by Luo Nan's interest. He played with the wraith sign's nest in the end. Yes, he even gave a Mo Luan puppet in the end. Luo Nan was a bit embarrassed, more or less. However, he was more curious about Madame Halder's mental state. This first ablatum, who was supposed to play the role of a stray dog, was able to freely turn the situation around in the face of powerful oppression. It wasn't just an act. Did she have something to rely on? It didn't seem like it. Looking at the fluctuations on the mental plane, it was absolutely not the relaxed state of one's mind. It was more like a state of excitement, stimulating enjoyment from the mind to the body. This woman was enjoying the dangerous situation she was currently in. How interesting. Not only was Luo Nen not annoyed, his intense curiosity and desire to investigate were aroused. He had a premonition that a special target like Madame Halder would be able to push his research to perfection. Just one of them was better than 10 Inlis. It was better than 100 or even 1,000 of those drunken fellows on the rooftop. Why hadn't he discovered this before? Luo Nan waved his hand and swept the sketches related to Fei Jin to the side in the virtual work area. He picked up his digital pen and quickly sketched lines in the work area. In the time it took to take a few breaths, Luo Nan was able to draw out most of Madame Halder's calm and composed bearing on the rocking chair. However, this was far from enough. It was also during this time that Madame Halder's voice drifted into his ears. "My order cannot ask you to do anything, Mr. Luo. I can only shamelessly plead. I plead for you to lend a helping hand for the sake of incense and incense." Luo Nen focused on Madame Halder's expression as she opened and closed her red lips. Information related to this person's body and soul structure, life sketches, mental state, and many other layers of information converged. The material was plentiful, and the angles were diverse. However, the tip of his pen rose and fell several times in the soft light pervading the work area. It was hard for him to write. There was a feeling that he wasn't able to grasp it. However, Madame Halder's next words caused the tip of Luo Nan's pen to go crooked. "After all, we are also members of the Xia City branch. We belong to the same branch of ability users." What the hell? Luo Nen couldn't help but raise his head and shout towards the inside of the room. "Madame Halder is a member of the Xia City branch." The two bodyguards looked at each other in dismay. They communicated with each other for a bit, and they actually gave an affirmative answer. Without a doubt, this was the fault of the tenets of the Ability User Society. It was self-proclaimed to be the industry association that accommodated all ability users of the entire world, and the members of this secret order were also ability users. In theory, they could only maintain an open attitude towards related personnel joining the society. However, there were very few people like Madame Halder, who brought the elites of the order to join, and who paid the membership fee regularly. Luo Nen drew 2 lines on the sketch and shook his head. This really was a sufficient reason. Madame Halder's gaze was bright, and the corner of her lips perked up. It was as if she was communicating with a friend. She was frank and straightforward. "Of course, just based on the Blood Soul Temple alone, I believe that Mr. Luo will look at the Blood Flame Order in a different light. How about this? If it's inconvenient to give the answer to the Hill of Bones, then I hope that Mr. Luo can help me solve another problem for the sake of incense and incense." "A technical problem." "A technical problem?" Luo Nen casually repeated. He adjusted the tip of his pen once more, drawing shadows in the work area. However, he was still unable to draw out the details a step further. He was always lacking by just a hair and a half. This made him a bit anxious, but he also had the impulse and yearning of wanting to obtain something that he couldn't obtain. "What are you lacking?" "Well, I'm asking, which part of your skills are lacking?" Yin Lu, who was so tense that she was about to collapse, suddenly had her eyes light up when these words were spoken. Her mind suddenly relaxed. She was now full of admiration for her boss's methods. "I've come around." I'm really slow on the uptake. The moment a person relaxed, their thoughts would come alive. Ian finally realized the meaning behind Madame Halder's words and actions. From the analysis of the personality mask, Madame Halder had promptly lowered her posture and responded honestly. From beginning to end, she had made an issue out of Luo Nan's weakest social method. In the end, there was only one goal. It was to induce Luo Nan's powerful mask to retreat. And the weak mask could not appear when communicating with the inner world. So naturally, the ideal mask would occupy the dominant position. As long as Luo Nan began to speak reason, the opportunity to cater to Madame Halder's interest would come. This was because the essence of the ideal mask was an intense emotional need for blood kin. In the current world, there was probably no one who could truly satisfy Luo Nan's desires. But she had to settle for the next best thing. She had to approach theoretical research, especially the research angle of formatting theory. It was extremely likely that she could trigger Luo Nan's compensatory mentality and obtain effective positive feedback. Making contact with Luo Nan right now should be the easiest opportunity to obtain a favorable impression from him. The most ideal method was obviously to cater to Luo Nan's thoughts and train of thought, to fully communicate with him, to give him enough respect and understanding. It would be best if she could provide him with inspiration and enlightenment. She clearly knew that there was such an opportunity and had made the corresponding contingency plans. But in the previous dangerous situation, all contingency plans were meaningless. Instead, Madame Halder remained calm in the face of danger. She gave a near-perfect demonstration. The most difficult period was over. Ian couldn't wait to think this way. Then she heard Madame Halder speak in a clear and smooth tone. Mr. Luo, I've said it before. The secret techniques of the Blood Soul Temple that have been passed down in our family are lacking. I wonder if Mr. Luo has the free time to help my order fix this flaw? Chapter 681. The flow of Ian Lee's thoughts was once again thrown into chaos. On one hand, her boss had directly tossed out the foundation of the order, the Blood Soul Temple. He had invited a wolf into the house. On the other hand, Luo Nan was not afraid at all. He cut straight to the point. How do you want to fix it? In terms of safety, efficiency, or general direction? Listening to Luo Nan's tone, it was as if he had a complete structural model of the Blood Soul Temple right next to him. Moreover, he had studied it hundreds and thousands of times. He was full of confidence. Ian felt stifled in her heart and couldn't let it out no matter what. Lady Halder's eyelashes also trembled slightly, but she maintained a relaxed smile on her face. She did not give a direct answer. Actually, I've already heard Mr. Luo's argument about plants and tools. It's only been a few hours and the news has already spread like wildfire. What Mrs. Halder spoke of was none other than Luo Nan's chat with Li Taixing. She made a judgment regarding the nature of the blood intent ring, the scales of truth, and the blood intent ring. Luo Nan sighed emotionally at this. It wasn't just because of the speed at which the information was disseminated. It was also because the system he was trying to construct right now had deviated from the tool type of the blood intent ring fortress and deviated towards the plant type. The solidified configurations of the various orders in the Abyss region are basically plant type, and it's the same for your Blood Soul Temple. But frankly speaking, that side of yours has gone awry. After all, the environment of the Abyss region is changing too quickly, and your order lacks a true extraordinary, so it is difficult to adjust the structure in time. Naturally, there are many problems. Mr. Luo has been paying attention to it? Yes, you guys are too exposed. Luo Nan's honesty against honesty finally caused Mrs. Halder to enter a state of silence for the first time. Oh, she was even more excited. At the same time, he appeared more reserved on the surface. The intense internal and external conflicts were like a constantly pressurized container, accumulating power round after round. The tip of Luo Nan's pen rose and fell. Though he had yet to put pen to paper, he was already certain that Lady Halder had a unique method of transforming the pressure of the outside world, turning it into a stimulant for her own state. This made Luo Nan even more interested. He tried to give Mrs. Halder a bit more pressure. He wanted to see just what sort of secret transformation technique she had. I think the most important thing for your order is to increase security. Originally, in the environment of the abyssal region, it was not easy to follow the vines to the melon and infiltrate the church's formation. All the clues would be distorted by the turbulence of the storm. If they took advantage of the situation to set up some traps, they would die. However, the lack of extraordinaries in your order has led to a serious rigidity in their formation system. If my guess is correct, fighting against the torrential storms of the Abyss region every day has already consumed a lot of energy, right? These should have been the best way for you to set up a defense line. In the end, the development and changes of the Abyss district in recent years has exceeded the original defense system. It has become a burden instead of a help. Not only does it not serve as a cover, it will also expose your position. In this way, if someone were to figure out the relevant structure and follow the clues, the situation would be very passive. Inla couldn't help but curse inwardly, "You're the one who followed the clues." Luo Nan's thoughts sprang up, and Luo Nan's thoughts followed closely. I won't deny that I have done some research on the solidified configuration of your order. It's a very good research object. Compared to the Order of Justice's Scales of Truth, it has many flaws, but it has more reference value. Mrs. Halder laughed involuntarily. So, we found the right person? Luo Nan snorted twice. Aside from the safety defense, the inability to make adjustments in time has led to the existence of too many cumbersome structures, causing the efficiency to drop. Oh, your order has been working hard to make adjustments over the past few years. Don't you feel that the more you make adjustments, the more control you have over the scales of truth, the weaker the borrowed power of guidance becomes? Truthfully speaking, Luo Nan was a bit unable to stop the car. Actually, he had mixed in some of the resentment from constructing the physical body of the Blood Soul Temple in the volcanic area. The errors in the direction of the Blood Flame Order's construction had affected Luo Nan's train of thought. The temperature and corresponding energy index of the lava lake that converged the physical body of the Blood Soul Temple had yet to reach the standard. A large part of this was due to a problem that came from the bones. As Luo Nan fiercely stepped on the accelerator on the road of criticism, Inla became more and more restless. Perhaps she herself didn't realize that her gaze was frequently drifting in the direction of her boss. Mrs. Halder sunk into silence once more, and the time of silence was lengthened. She knew that Luo Nan was under the guidance of the concept mask, and she had actively guided the topic of discussion. However, the gap in knowledge between the two in this field was much larger than she had imagined. It must be known that this was the Blood Soul Temple. This was the foundation of the Blood Flame Order that she controlled. It was truly a disgrace. The smile on Mrs. Halder's face grew deeper, and her limbs became more relaxed. Only a certain area between her heart and lungs burned like boiling lava. It was as if it could burn through her body, yet not a single bit of heat seeped out. She didn't avoid the gap, but she also shouldn't cater to failure. So she cleverly shifted the focus of the topic. Mr. Luo, your suggestion is truly priceless. So what you're saying is that we can cooperate? Haven't we already started? Luo Nan had a very astonished appearance. Mrs. Halder laughed. Mr. Luo, won't you confirm the opinions of the Xia City branch and Tianbang again? I forgot. Luo Nan really had forgotten. Tianbang and the Blood Flame Order, or more accurately, Mrs. Halder's branch, had irreconcilable contradictions and hatred. And right now, the cooperation between the Xia City branch and the Xia City military and government was in the honeymoon phase. Luo Nan himself even assumed the role of Chief Technology Officer for the Fortress Project. If news of his collaboration with Lady Halder were to be revealed at this time, many things would become complicated. But, the so-called threat of a variable, or the special value that Lady Halder embodies, which one is more important? Luo Nan was about to slip into the domain that he was the worst at. At this time, the consequences of exposing Fei Jin's background and insisting on having a secret discussion with her were revealed. On the psychic wave network, He Yuan sent a communication request. Hey, Sister Yuan. Yes, I know. That woman is just a conduit. She's not a threat. Of course, it's best if we can hide it from the other side. Thank you, Sister Yuan. See you later. You guys are making too much noise. I'm very sorry to have caused you trouble. Madame Halder no longer had to work so hard. Now that she had to face the gap in theory, she was able to deal with it with ease. Forget it. I really am interested in studying the Blood Soul Temple in depth. We can talk about collaborating, but I still need to ask for their opinion. Mr. Luo, the matters of the Blood Soul Temple aren't suitable for public procedures. Of course, I won't cause trouble for myself. I'll get in touch with you later. Luo Nan sighed as he spoke. It would be impossible for him to see through Madame Halder's secret transformation technique in a spurt of energy today. This woman was simply like a fortress sealed in flesh and blood. Blood would flow when he stabbed down with a knife, but no matter what he did, he was unable to stab through. He was unable to see any vital points. Even the Blood Soul Temple, the foundation of the order, was unable to shake her mental defenses. Could it be that this woman didn't have any weaknesses? Or was there a mistake in his direction? Luo Nan was prepared to go back and make a proper plan. He was going to display the absolute advantage of his mental sensing network. He was going to carefully observe and monitor her, whether it was her body, her mind, or, oh, that's right. Luo Nan suddenly discovered that he had forgotten to do something very important. But in a moment of forgetfulness, his mind followed the mental sensing network and manifested itself 80 kilometers away. This naturally led to a misunderstanding. Madame Halder was stunned for a moment before responding, "Mr. Luo, is there anything else you want to say?" Luo Nan was a bit embarrassed. He couldn't say something stupid like, "I forgot that you guys aren't in the altar's spiderweb. I'll trap you guys in later." His brain delayed for 2 seconds before he found an excuse to beat around the bush. He was thankful for the illuminated work area in front of Yinlu. It gave Luo Nan inspiration, and it also made him remember an extremely crucial detail. Speaking of which, you guys have done quite well in your preparatory work. Mr. Luo, you mean? Like Fei Jin, the analysis diagram, and so on. The virtual work area in front of Yinlu slightly changed in this moment. The relevant interface performed the simplest of rollback operations. This was done in a situation where no one was controlling it. At the very least, Yinlu, who held the sole control authority, was certain that she hadn't made any movements. Under Yinli's bone-chilling gaze, the content displayed in the work area changed back to the most damning one, the analysis of the persona that the 2 first ablatums of the Blood Flame Order had done based on the persona intelligence collection. Yinlu had indeed done a lot of homework. There was a lot of content in the diagram, but the flow was clear and the logic was strict. It was the type of diagram that one could grasp the core meaning of with just a few careful glances. But such an outstanding work of art had become a fatal dagger. It pierced through Yinli's chest, and it slowly and firmly penetrated deeper. Luo Nan's thoughts were clear in his daze. "This is quite interesting. Can you give me a copy?" Madame Halder's reply was very calm. "Of course. I hope it will be of some use to Mr. Luo." "Thank you." The attached equipment in the virtual work area began to transmit data during the polite conversation. It was sent to Luo Nan's personal mailbox. Yinlu, who held the sole control authority, could only watch from the side from start to finish. How did he do it? Speaking of which, it was meaningless. Yinlu closed her eyes. She knew that she had made a low-level mistake. She should have immediately erased all traces of the sensitive diagram after replacing it. Madame Halder had attracted the majority of Luo Nan's attention. Luo Nan had been endlessly gushing about his comprehensive understanding of the Blood Soul Temple. All she needed was a slight thought to silently annihilate the crisis. But she didn't do it? Let alone Madame Halder, even she found it hard to forgive her own slowness and stupidity. Chapter 682. Oh my, an unexpected harvest. Luo Nan never expected that the effects of mounting the Luo Nan ruler would manifest so quickly. The barrier in Yinli's heart had practically collapsed like a broken dam. Perhaps she still had a chance to repair herself, but the Wraith sign had noiselessly shaken off 2 strands of spider silk in the polar domain, which was even deeper than the abyssal region. This was to make up for the work of constructing the network nodes. One strand directly adhered to the structure of Yin Li's body and soul. Yin Lu, whose mind was in turmoil, was completely unaware of it. And the instant the connection was made, a portion of essence energy spilled out due to the turmoil in her mind. It flowed out along the spider's silk and seamlessly connected to the altar's spiderweb, linking up with each other. From Luo Nan's perspective, Yin Lu had become a normal operating node on the altar's spiderweb. Though Luo Nan couldn't say that he understood everything about her, he was able to see the majority of the changes in trends from the corresponding feedback. Of course, he could do more direct interference. On the other hand, though Mrs. Halder's spider silk was able to adhere with force, the altar's spiderweb was unable to reach the core when it attempted to establish a connection with her. It was unable to extract life essence energy. The operating mechanism of the winner takes all and the loser perishes appeared to be blocked here. If the nodes of the altar's spiderweb were like Mrs. Halder's, then this network could simply be shut down. This woman is truly amazing. Luo Nan harbored such thoughts, not caring about the temporary setback. Instead, he was more curious about the analysis diagram that he had seized on the spur of the moment. What sort of image did he have in the eyes of the amazing Mrs. Halder? Since the diagram was logical and clear, Luo Nan scanned it once and had a certain understanding of the results of the analysis. The feeling was quite complicated. It was a bit shameful, but it was quite interesting. Some of the conclusions made him ponder, but some were quite repulsive. When put together, it seemed a bit scary. But when he mulled it over, he was inexplicably pleased with himself. Overall, he felt that it was quite reasonable. So I'm actually this sort of person. Is it good or bad? It should be okay. Boss. Yin Lu spoke with a hoarse voice 80 kilometers away. Her breath was dry and weak. It was hard for her to continue. Her mind was still a bit muddled right now. She didn't dare to think about what sort of terrible consequences her terrible reaction would bring. Don't think too much about it, Madame Halder said calmly. Some things are all about coincidence. It was easy for us to obtain this piece of information, so it's not a big deal to give it up. Mr. Luo isn't someone who fusses over every ounce. These words were addressed to both sides at the same time. Luo Nan had already said his goodbyes before, but if he really wanted to make a comeback, there were no access fences in this region of Xia City that could stop him. Actually, Luo Nan was still paying attention. Mrs. Halder faintly smiled. It looked like she didn't mind Yin Li's major mistake at all. She didn't care about Luo Nan's possible negative feedback either. She even had the leisure to continue making a small analysis. Mr. Luo's age is at the tail end of puberty. His personality is still unsettled. It's not bad to have a clear understanding of himself. Moreover, judging from the intelligence, Mr. Luo's hormone secretion was in disorder during the most critical years of his second puberty. Mr. Luo had been constantly taking medicine to modify his nervous system, and his development was also lagging. His body affected his mind, so it was only natural that his personality would change greatly. What's the point of torturing yourself for a change that's destined to happen? Clearly, Mrs. Halder had noticed Yin Li's terrible state. She began to relieve her stress and teased Luo Nan in passing. This probably meant that a certain someone was still a child who had yet to finish puberty. Luo Nan didn't know what sort of attitude he should take to deal with this. Oh, right now he was the one who said his goodbyes. He should pretend not to hear it. He completed his mental construction with great difficulty when laughter suddenly came from beside him. Mr. Luo, your previous words might have been a bit offensive, but they are all variables after all. You absolutely cannot be careless, nor can you have any rebellious thoughts. Forcefully changing your personality isn't necessarily a good thing. Luo Nan turned his head speechlessly and saw Fei Jin to the side. A subtle and indescribable smile was displayed on her youthful and beautiful face. She formed a similar yet contradictory picture with Mrs. Halder, who was 80 kilometers away. Was this a counterattack? Luo Nan really didn't expect that Mrs. Halder would use Fei Jin, an old channel. Just as he was frowning, Fei Jin's dazed and bewildered eyes regained some light. She lightly swept her gaze over and stopped at the glowing virtual work area in front of Luo Nan. This was Luo Nan's sketchwork. Though it was just a silhouette and the facial features were still messy, the bearing of a mature woman on the rocking chair had already appeared. It formed a clear correspondence with the scene 80 kilometers away. The two women were of different ages and appearances, but their words and charms were synchronized at this moment. "Mr. Luo, you're quite interested in me?" "You can say that." Luo Nan was embarrassed at first, but then he thought about it. "You guys took me apart into 3 pieces and tossed them around on a diagram. Can't I just make a portrait of you?" The thought sprouted in his mind, and he added a few words at the back. He even said in a genteel manner, "There are many aspects of Mrs. Halder that can be drawn." Ian Lee's eyes went wide. She subconsciously held her breath. Mrs. Halder was still as calm as before. According to the intelligence, when Mr. Luo first entered the profession, he was a psychic who entered the path of painting. He was extremely efficacious. "I wonder if there is anything particular about this painting?" "There is." Luo Nan turned to look at this unfinished painting. He wanted to use this opportunity to retort. He couldn't lose his momentum. But the words in his mind were like a sketch that couldn't be continued. They were stuck in the middle, unable to evolve any further. The sketch was still the same sketch, but his train of thought and structure had been replaced by the constantly changing impressions. It was completely unrecognizable. Of course, it was very easy for Luo Nan to make a simple sketch right now. He was able to sketch out Mrs. Halder's charm with just a few strokes. But the problem was that Luo Nan's goal had never been a simple sketch. Instead, he started from the core of his mental senses, reproducing and refining from multiple angles and all aspects. This draft was far too lacking when compared to his own requirements. The foundation of Mrs. Halder was far more complex and profound than what he knew when he first began to draw. At this very moment, Luo Nan suddenly felt like he was a stupid student who was nearing the end of an exam but had yet to finish answering the questions. An incorporeal pressure quietly grew, and by the time he realized it, it had already formed quite a large scale. She was truly amazing. This wasn't the first time Luo Nan let out this sort of sigh. However, the holes in his imagination were quite a bit larger than last time. Perhaps this was Mrs. Halder's ruler that probed into his heart. Mrs. Halder gave Luo Nan a reminder. When he used Luo Nan's ruler to probe into the depths of others' hearts, others would have a reaction force. Some of them were insignificant and unrecognizable, like He Donglu, Yu Qi, and even Yin Lu. Some of them were much more powerful, much more swift and fierce, like Mrs. Halder. All sorts of forces converged together and squeezed together. It was only natural that there would be pressure. Madame Halder was but the most obvious of these. Other reactions, neat and fragmentary, were still steadily gathering. Actually, Luo Nan already had a similar experience. Back when the altar spiderweb had just been set up, the vital energy circulating within was taxed. Even though each bit was just a fraction, many a little makes an ocean, there was still an enormous amount of profit. Of course, this profit was a kind of positive feedback, but the enormous accumulation itself was pressure. Fortunately, Luo Nan had the Wraith Sign, the Blood Soul Temple, the Soul Cloak, and a series of other distribution channels. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been squeezed to the point of bursting. He just needed a bit of residual energy to continue to support the God Gear Icy Ocean. This would give his body gear enough driving force to maintain rapid progress. Positive feedback was already like this. Negative feedback. Well, from a higher level, there was no such thing as positive or negative feedback. It was just how to deal with it. Take a look at Mrs. Halder. She had digested and reused Luo Nan's overbearing pressure. She was like an enormous furnace, smelting out the most suitable materials for herself. Speaking of which, the methods of both sides were pretty much the same. It was just that Luo Nan needed to carefully ponder and learn Mrs. Halder's method of transforming the negative interference force. However, the most important thing right now was that Luo Nan finally grasped a thread of inspiration after some contemplation. Perhaps his awkward silence lasted a bit too long, but it didn't matter. The tip of his pen gently moved, and his thoughts that had been blocked for a while were cleared up. He finally began to ink in the virtual work area that had been vacant for a long time. Luonan didn't do anything else. He just focused on strengthening the contrast between the light and the dark side, causing Mrs. Halder, who was sitting calmly in the work, to have more tension in the dark side. It was so much so that it appeared slightly distorted. It was like a furnace emitting high temperatures to the outside world. Her pupils, half hidden in the dark side, were like fiery red doors. It was as if high-temperature flames could sputter out from them at any time. Wow! Fei Jin let out a soft sigh from the side. Of course, this was synchronized with her controller. But there was actually nothing else after this. The corner of Luo Nan's lips perked up. Some things really were comprehensible by drawing analogies. When his sketch work was completed, his blurry and ever-changing impressions suddenly became clear and definite. Especially the spiderweb that had been tossing and turning around Mrs. Halder all this time. The tactile feedback of the spiderweb also became real. It was as if he had touched a blazing furnace sealed in flesh and blood. He could feel the scorching and surging energy within, but the energy was highly orderly. Practically every bit of it had a clear direction of flow. He understood a little bit. A knock came from the room at this time. Not even 2 seconds later, someone knocked on the glass door to the balcony. "Mr. Luo, is it convenient?" Yueyin was on the other side of the glass door. "Oh, Sister Yueyin. Please come in." Luo Nan quickly responded. At this time, Fei Jin reached out a hand to touch her chest. She bowed toward him. "This item has been returned to its rightful owner. What she needs right now is a good night's sleep. I'll be borrowing the bedroom for a bit. You can do whatever you want with it." Chapter 683. Fei Jin was like a virtuous lady returning home. She maintained her graceful posture as she walked out from the balcony. She turned to the bedroom next to her. She even remembered to say, "Good night, everyone." Only then did she gently close the door and settle down. Actually, everyone knew that with Luo Nan, a master of perception, there was no point in closing the door. It was just a gesture. Soon, the breathing in the bedroom turned from shallow to chaotic. It was as if they had sunk into a nightmare. This was more or less the same result for the real Fei Jin. It would be better to ask Mr. Bai to come and take a look tomorrow. He's an expert in mental invasion and hypnosis. Yueyin gave a suggestion. Luo Nan was fine with getting rid of future troubles. Yueyin's goal in coming over wasn't just this. Luo Nan was very clear on this. He also thought of a good way to explain, Sister Yueyin, Mrs. Halder has arrived in Xia City? Just as he started, loud whistles and jeers surged in from outside the balcony. A few extremely bored second-generation kids were looking forward to Luo Nan and Fei Jin doing something on the balcony. Although Fei Jin had entered the room by herself, the seamless connection was made in the blink of an eye. A great beauty with even greater bearing and elegance came up. There seemed to be more room for imagination, so their moods were stirred up quite a bit. This period of time was enough for quite a few people to stuff some alcohol and food down their throats. The effects of alcohol and drugs surged up, and the words that came out of their mouths became even more boundless. There was no need to talk about the off-key words. He Donglu, who had been the vanguard of stirring up trouble, simply gave up on the long-legged beauty he had just hooked up with when he saw the great stylish OL lady from everyone's mouths. He pulled up his collar and ran away. Under the simultaneous effects of Luo Nan's ruler and the reading ruler, perhaps he was the most pitiful person. Serves him right. Luo Nan ignored He Donglu. His gaze swept across the bodies of those fellows, but he didn't use any methods for now. He just reorganized his words. Speaking of which, the people of the Blood Flame Order are quite interested in the Abyssal Region configuration. Tian Bang invited me to be his technical consultant, and Mrs. Halder is the same. He intentionally skipped over the hard-to-explain node of the White Bone Mound. He reorganized a plausible logic, but Yueyin should be able to understand 70 to 80% of it. But Luo Nan himself was startled just as he finished speaking. Speaking of which, Tian Bang was the one who led the fortress project and exerted his strength in the solidification of the Abyssal Region's configuration. Could it be that he had thoughts about the Blood Soul Temple? This was a logical thing, and it was also an angle that he had neglected before. Mr. Luo, since we're talking about Tianbang, I feel that Mrs. Halder would be very happy to let Tianbang know about your cooperation with them. Tianbang might not care, but it's hard to predict the team behind him. Really? If I can weaken Tianbang's possible allies and gain a helping hand for myself, the risk itself isn't that great. Why not? This was another question that Luo Nan had never thought about. However, with Lady Halder's shrewdness, it was normal for her to have considered all of this. Compared to her, Luo Nan's mental level was truly not on the same level. At this moment, He Yuan's gaze landed on the virtual work area. She stared at the sketch and was somewhat astonished. This is a psychic drawing targeted at Madame Halder? Sort of. Luo Nan responded unhurriedly. He already discovered that no matter how much he considered the conflict between Madame Halder and Tianbang, it would be a waste of effort. He would not let go of the chance to deeply research the Blood Soul Temple. The physical Blood Soul Temple beneath the volcanic region of the southwest was still bitterly waiting for a breakthrough in the aspect of configuration. This could be considered an extremely important link in his plan to purify the cloud world and assassinate Gong Qi. He certainly could not let it go. He Yuan adjusted her angle and gradually stood side by side with Luo Nan. She observed the sketch very seriously. I've seen Madame Halder once, and I always felt that her temperament was very hard to grasp. This drawing actually made my impression clear all of a sudden. Do you have any more concrete information? It's hard to say right now. Luo Nan did not speak of his immature opinion, but he gradually came to a conclusion in his mind. He was certainly not a match for Madame Halder in terms of scheming, but from the perspective of the abyssal region's solidified configuration, Madame Halder had the virtual brain system to support her. The gap between them would only be greater. Both sides cooperated with each other and mutually harmed each other. In the end, it all depended on the speed at which each side could materialize their advantages. Even if Madame Halder harbored ill intentions, as long as Luo Nan was able to crack the mystery of the Blood Soul Temple, he would still be the one taking advantage. At the very least, this was what Luo Nan understood. There was a problem. Should he accept Madame Halder's invitation and enter through the main door with the identity of a technical consultant? Or should he be a bit more straightforward? Regardless of whether there was a door or not, he should just smash a door open and actively invade? The psychic diagram had been drawn. What else was there to say? Luo Nan curled his lips. He felt more and more that these matters were meaningless. As his thoughts became clear, a stream of information was stimulated. It crossed space and connected with the Wraith sign, who was standing guard in the cloud world. The spider silk that hung down by itself was proven to be useless against Madame Halder. Luo Nan could only let the Wraith sign personally take action in search of a miraculous effect. The ugly and strange demon traversed the deep mental space several seconds later. It also traversed the barrier between the cloud world and the local space and time. It descended noiselessly. It found its target amidst the turbid flow of emotions of the millions and millions of people in Xia City. It gradually approached Eastern City District. The two first ablatums of the Blood Flame Order were in the room. The silence grew longer and longer. Madame Halder closed her eyes, blocking out all light. However, her mind was illuminated by a candle. It penetrated the gloomy darkness, and her mind was clear and bright. Only in this way could she obtain peace. Of course, it was practically impossible for true peace to exist. This was because when one faced a master of perception, it was like encountering a soul that had always been attached to one's back. Perhaps there was no pressure from the silent thundercloud here, but a pair of eyes could lock onto one's target at any time. They would come and go willfully, and there was practically no possibility of concealment. This was absolutely the power of an extraordinary. Even though Luo Nan still had clear shortcomings right now, whether it was in terms of his body or his personality, his market prospects had already soared to the apex. They were boundlessly bright. In a society like this, even if the price-to-earnings ratio continued to rise, it was impossible to stop the expectations of investors towards the future. And potential competitors would not be lenient. The capital market was filthy, but it was not inferior in the inner world. A giant maelstrom of chaos had already formed. Would the investor who called himself a traveler continue to invest in the market, or would he raise his butcher's knife? As for the Blood Flame Order and even Madame Halder herself, they clearly knew that a giant maelstrom was in front of them. Did they still want to throw their limited capital into it? Well, she didn't have a choice. Madame Halder had signed a gambling agreement. She used her limited strength to pry open an enormous amount of capital. She would either achieve success and fame, or she would leave with nothing, or she would even leap up to the rooftop. She was very excited. The elements of crisis and despair seeped down from the higher levels of reason and emotion, layer by layer. They transformed into restless emotions and even trembled like electricity. From high to low, they converged into a flood, drowning her body and mind. Ever since she personally beheaded her husband, this was the feeling she treasured the most. Every time it came, she would carefully ponder over it and experience it for a long time. Boss. Ian Lee's trembling voice rang in her ears. The trembling contained within was similar to her own, but not in spirit. It was a complete collapse of the higher and lower levels. It was a dismal and chaotic situation that could not be sorted out. It had to be said that after staying in the secular world for so long, Ian Lee's way of thinking was no longer that of a qualified first ablatum. Instead, she was that of an outstanding merchant. She had already lost the ability to extrapolate and analyze from the extraordinary plane. She lacked the corresponding ability to resist pressure. From this perspective, she really couldn't compare to that traitor, Ren Hong. However, Madame Halder knew very well that she was the one who had created this situation. She had never raised Ian Lu as a successor. Not in the past and not now. Madame Halder still did not open her eyes. She only moved her hand that was on her knee a little outwards. 2 seconds later, her fingertips touched Ian Lee's smooth and delicate hair. The warmth of her palm and the top of her head intertwined, and it felt very comfortable. She gently stroked it a few times, and then she heard Ian Lee's muffled voice. "Boss, I'm sorry." Ian Lu was the executive officer of her business empire, a tentacle of power in the church, and a pet to amuse when she was bored. Madame Halder never had high expectations for Ian Lu. As long as she could block out some of the noise from the secular world, it was enough. From the looks of it, this pet to amuse had already far exceeded the upper limits of her expectations. This proved that it was a worthwhile investment. Since it was worth it, why would she be angry? Madame Halder sighed softly. It wasn't because she was depressed, but rather, it was a rare emotion. Her action of caressing Ian Lee's head was still gentle. Perhaps it was due to the relaxation after the high pressure, but today her emotions were like spider webs swaying in the wind and drizzle. She couldn't sort them out and couldn't see them clearly. As for the feeling, it wasn't bad. Not bad? A thought sprouted in her mind, and her stroking palms suddenly froze. Her heart was on guard. These remnant thoughts and distracting thoughts that had long since settled in her heart had surfaced. What was the reasoning behind this? The air froze in an instant. Ian Lu, who was extremely sensitive to begin with, felt her breathing and heartbeat stagnate along with the pause of the palm on her head. She didn't dare to move. She could only raise her eyes to look at her boss's expression. Madame Halder opened her eyes at this moment. Their gazes lightly met. Ian Lu subconsciously wanted to dodge, but she didn't dare to. She could only freeze there, doing her best to maintain the little bit of calmness she had on the surface. Several seconds later, Madame Halder's sigh entered her ears once more. Xia City really isn't a place to stay for long. Boss, then we. This isn't a place you can leave whenever you want. Madame Halder spoke faintly. She closed her eyes once more and withdrew her hand. It's too late. Go rest. There's no point in thinking too much. It's better to have a good night's sleep. Good dreams. It's best if you don't dream. Yes, boss. Inla didn't dare to say anything more. She slowly got up and left the room with light footsteps. She even turned off the lights. Even though she was paying close attention, Madame Halder's sharp ears could still hear the rhythmic sound of footsteps echoing within the apartment. The lingering sound was like an invisible demon. It drifted here and there, lingering without dissipating. Did such a demon really exist? Madame Halder was unable to obtain an answer. Chapter 684. This person's senses were really sharp. Ronan was astonished. Aside from those transcendents, Lady Halder was the only one who was clearly aware of the Wraith Talisman's methods. The Wraith sigil was indeed there. It was crawling in the depths of Madame Halder's mind. Using inconceivable methods, it had intertwined a web of nothingness in the depths of Madame Halder's mind. The entire process went smoothly, and Lady Halder's vigilance didn't really affect her. It's good that everything went smoothly. That's all for tonight. Luo Nan twisted his neck and relaxed from the bottom of his heart. He couldn't be bothered with the clamoring from the rooftop. These people were merely experimental subjects for him to ponder over the Luo Nan Chi. Now that he had a better target, why should he waste his time and energy? He sent a signal to the Wraith sign, telling it to return to the cloud world as soon as possible. Without the Wraith sign, it would be more troublesome to cross the space-time barrier. The Wraith sign's reaction had always been very timely. The heavily chained crow created by formatting theory was the most stable channel and control valve. However, this time, the Wraith sign's movements were somewhat sluggish, and its attention seemed to be diverted. Luo Nan was immediately aware of the minute changes. At this moment, the Wraith Talisman's focus was no longer on Lady Halder. Instead, it was on the other side of the room, where Yin Lu was in a daze. Luo Nan was quite baffled. The Wraith sign had always been a picky eater. Even though he was good at using the turbid flow of emotions, he wouldn't easily become interested in the turbid flow. At this moment, the barrier in Yin Li's mind had already collapsed. The reconstruction was still a long way off, so she shouldn't have the trait of attracting the Wraith rune. But at this moment, the Wraith Talisman was circling around Yin Lu in the depths of her mind. Its 6 extraordinary splendor eyes locked onto its target. A few breaths later, it opened its mouth and a blood-red radiance flowed down like scorching saliva. Luo Nan noticed that there was actually a speck mixed within the bloody light due to the particularity of the aura. The speck's luster was dim, and it undulated indeterminately within the bloody light. However, as it rushed out of the Wraith sign's body and circulated in the deep space, some connections that had existed for a long time but had been cut off were re-established. The particles flickered and seemed to possess a certain level of activity. They flew out from the bloody light and flickered incessantly as they fluttered about. What's the situation? 80 kilometers away, Luo Nan was surprised by this turn of events. His mind cut into the body of the Wraith sign based on the nature of the bloody light. He passed through the chaotic clouds of purple lightning formed from the chaos element to point directly at the Blood Soul Temple that was being suppressed. Following the guidance of the aura, he quickly found the source of the change in the second floor's garden area. One is missing. The overall layout of the second floor of the Blood Soul Temple was like an artificial garden, but its specific function was not too clear. However, there were a few foreign objects deposited here. They were the shepherd marks that the first and vice ablatums of the Blood Flame Order and Elder Emolun had refined in order to control the human-faced arachnid and establish the Blood Soul Temple. There were at most 4 shepherd marks, and they looked like fireflies floating up and down. However, one of them belonged to the traitor of the Blood Flame Order, Renhong. Luo Nan forcefully pulled it out and tossed it into the bottommost layer of the magma lake, completely destroying it. This also caused Renhong to perish. The other one belonged to Emolun. It had already become the core of his puppet construction. It wasn't here either. Thus, there were only 2 shepherd's marks left in the garden. One belonged to Lady Halder, and the other belonged to Yin Lu. The 2 marks lost all of their light due to their connection to the outside world being severed. All that was left behind was their pure and precise structure. They had been obediently staying in this area all this time, allowing Luo Nan to study them. But now, one of the 2 shepherd marks had been swept out. It was none other than the one that originally belonged to Yin Lu. After it flew out, or rather, it was spat out by the Wraith sign, It re-established a connection with its original owner. Lu, who was in a daze, was completely unaware that the aura of her body had once again connected with the mark in the depths of her mind. The mark was bestowed with radiance and vitality once more. She was like a firefly dancing in a river of blood. Wraith sign, what's the meaning of this? Are you taking the initiative to expose yourself? Luonen couldn't understand the logic behind this. Well, he had no way of communicating with the Wraith sign through logic. He could only rely on the trust he had all this time and observe with a head full of fog. The situation of the firefly dancing didn't last for too long. Or it could be said that the firefly's autonomy only lasted for a few seconds. It would have been fine if the link hadn't been established. But once the link was established, a hidden switch within the mark was activated. Lu, the shepherd mark, and the Wraith sign were connected to the Blood Soul Temple. The problem of the difference in pressure had appeared. How could a mere Lu be mentioned in the same breath as the Blood Soul Temple and the Wraith sign? The intensity of her aura could bestow light upon the shepherd mark, but the Wraith sign and the Blood Soul Temple could light her up as well. Just like this, the power of the Blood Soul Temple within the Wraith sign's body rushed over like water under high pressure. The strength of Li's aura was utterly defeated under the enormous disparity. The surging bloody light entered the shepherd mark and forced the energy of the energy to flow in the opposite direction. The shepherd mark appeared to be agile above the long river of bloody light in the depths of her mind, but it actually danced along with the general trend. It just flew in this way, following the bloody light and imprinting itself into the structure of Li's body and soul. The shepherd mark was condensed by Lu using a secret technique, so they came from the same source. Plus, Li's mind was in a trance, so she didn't notice this at all. She just felt her exhaustion increase by a few levels. In a daze, she put on her clothes and fell asleep. In her sleep, the power of the same source but different quickly diluted the original nature of the energy within her body, causing it to undergo some sort of change and mutation. It entered an irreversible one-way path. Hiss, wouldn't Lu become a vassal of the Wraith sign's version of the Blood Soul Temple? Luonan's horizons were broadened as this play played out. However, he didn't consider how this change would affect him. Instead, a completely irrelevant thought occupied his mind. This configuration is a scam. Luonan had examined the structure of the shepherd imprint a few times. It was a configuration. Let's not talk about how marvelous it was. At the very least, its degree of precision was astonishing. It even surpassed the condensation ring by a level. Luonan naturally used it as a research target. But he never expected that this mysterious structure, which could control the larvae of the human-faced arachnid, would have such a deep hole buried in it. Which damned control hub would create a two-way channel? For example, Luonan used the heavily chained crow to control the Wraith sign. It had always been a one-way channel. Luonan's soul strength transmission would be amplified, while the opponent's strength would be obstructed. This was the only way to guarantee the safety of the controller. Otherwise, wouldn't the controller be instantly countered if the controller grew stronger? It was just like Lu right now. Such a design wasn't stupid, it was bad. Luonan thought back to the information he obtained from the Blood Flame Order. It seemed that this imprint wasn't developed by them. They borrowed it from some investor? The situation inside was complicated. Right now, it was Lu. If it was Mrs. Halder instead, what would the result be? What would the result be if the entire transformation happened? The transformation of Li's energy still needed some time. Luonan could do it, but he wasn't prepared to speed up the process. He needed more time to observe. The problem was that while Luonan was stable, the Wraith sign Blood Soul Temple was quite anxious. It wasn't enough to control Lu. The surging river of bloody light followed the momentum of the charge. Borrowing the current state where the aura wasn't clear, it circled around Li's body and soul structure for a moment before it found another passageway and charged over majestically. The Blood Soul Temple was on the other side of the channel. However, the Blood Soul Temple in the Abyss District was the foundation of the Blood Flame Order's existence. Luo Nen watched in a stupefied state as the Wraith Sign Blood Soul Temple's river of bloody light poured into the Abyss District with Yin Li acting as a guide. This sort of reverse infusion was certainly abnormal, but Yin Li's chaotic state of mind, the homologous nature of the Blood Soul Temple served as a cover, and the Wraith Sign Blood Soul Temple's methods were added in. Everything seemed to go smoothly. At the very least, the Blood Soul Temple in the Abyss District was completely unaware of the external energy being poured into it. Luo Nen knew that the Blood Soul Temple in the Abyss District and the Wraith Sign Blood Soul Temple's structure were basically the same. Using a visual perspective to observe, they were both lofty mountains. There were 5 groups of buildings built according to the terrain of the mountains. From bottom to top, there were stone forests, lava lakes, courtyards, gardens, faceless grottos, temples, halls, and altars at the top of the mountain, and so on. There was also fiery red lava flowing and zigzagging through them. Right now, the river of bloody light that originated from the Wraith Sign Blood Soul Temple had merged with the fiery red lava flowing up and down here in a short few breaths of time. Then it was transported to every corner of the Abyss District's structure. And every time it reached a place, it would gather and organize the information there, giving it layer after layer of feedback. The Wraith Sign didn't deal with these things. The final recipient could only be Luo Nan. Yin Li's telepathic thoughts reside at the altar at the top of the mountain. There's a strong person. He should be fleshly by her side. His willpower is firm, and he's on the 4th floor. This person is Meng Chong, right? Jiang Yuanjin is on the 2nd floor. Wu Kuei's aura is quite obscure. He's on the 3rd floor. Soon, not only Yin Lu, but every member of the Blood Flame Order who had the qualifications to occupy a certain position in the Blood Soul Temple's system had their status, role, and current state displayed. In these few dozen seconds, a confidential list spread out before Luo Nan's eyes. This list was undoubtedly the foundation of the Blood Flame Order. It encompassed all the talents and resources that the Blood Flame Order had accumulated over the decades. Once this list was grasped by someone. Fine, Luo Nan was holding this list right now. As long as he wanted to, he could follow the clues to the melon. He could rely on his soul cloak and various techniques and methods on the mental plane to wipe out these people in one fell swoop. It didn't seem to take much effort. Scam. What a scam! Luo Nen couldn't help scratching his head. How did things suddenly develop to this step? Speaking of which, if he hadn't interfered, if he had allowed the Blood Flame Order to complete a series of plans and fuse the Abyss District, the sacrificial artifact of the human-faced arachnid, and perhaps the physical structure of the Blood Soul Temple into one, then it would have been hard to say who would have control over the Blood Soul Temple. Sure enough, investors would eat people up without spitting out the bones. A somewhat childish thought flashed through Luo Nan's mind. Then he turned his attention to the most respected person on the list. Chapter 685. The results were somewhat outside of Luo Nan's expectations. The lowest level of the Blood Soul Temple in the Abyss District was also a lake of magma in the stone forest. It was also a place where foreign energies were digested and smelted. The structure of this place was different from the other 2 Blood Soul Temples. There were tens of thousands of believers here at all times. They poured out negative, intense, and extreme emotions and distracting thoughts through telepathic channels. Yin Li's mutation power had bypassed this stage in the beginning, but after circling around the Blood Soul Temple in the Abyss District, she still had to pass through the lake of magma in the end. Thus, Luo Nen obtained the opportunity to make close contact. The moment he got close, it was as if he was forcefully stuffed into a roaring mechanical factory or a surging waterfall. Hysterical screams and roars filled his ears, causing him to almost cover his ears. Luo Nen frowned and grinned. He switched through a few layers of his senses in order to filter out most of the negative information. And it was at this time that he faintly sensed that Lady Halder's consciousness was also within this lake of magma. As for the exact location, the surging flow of negative and extreme emotions was far too noisy. The smelting mutation power itself was like a smelting furnace, and it affected his senses to a certain extent. Luo Nan was unable to figure it out for a time. But as the precision of his detection increased, Luo Nan was certain that Lady Halder, the leader of the Blood Flame Order, had her consciousness residing within the depths of the lake of magma in the stone forest. She was at the lowest level of this chaotic and violent place. In a certain sense, this could be considered as taking the lead. After all, this place could be considered the foundation of the Blood Soul Temple. It wasn't just the Abyss District configuration that was like this. Everything else, be it the construction and polishing of sacrificial artifacts, or the reconstruction of the physical structure, all had to be started from here. Wasn't Luo Nan stuck at this stage as well? From his perspective, there really was a problem with the configuration of the Blood Soul Temple. In the physical structure, the temperature of the lake of magma wasn't high enough. In the Abyss District configuration, the problem was that the efficiency of smelting foreign energy wasn't high. Perhaps it was because of this that Lady Halder personally oversaw this place. Perhaps she was mobilizing and arranging the power of the Blood Soul Temple to smelt and purify the extreme negative emotions that wildly surged in? This was more in line with Luo Nan's conjecture of a smelting furnace. Luo Nan waited for further feedback. But after a period of time, he discovered that the unstoppable river of bloody light under the control of the Wraith Sign was somewhat impassable in the foundational grounds of the Blood Flame Order. It was hard to advance into the detection area. It's really different with someone around. Luo Nan soon discovered where the problem lay. The reason for this was that Madame Hard's presence had greatly increased the melting ability of the lava lake in the stone forest. To be more precise, the melting ability of the area around her had greatly increased. The strange power of the Blood Soul Temple that had seeped in had no problem moving in the other layers of the magma lake. However, once it got close to the core area, it would be affected by the interference, and even had the tendency of being smelted and mutated. If they got too close, they might be melted. If they resisted, they might be discovered. Thus, they could only draw a rough boundary and keep their distance. Luo Nan didn't interfere with the Wraith Sign's judgment. To hell with judgment. It was clearly evading by instinct. The good days of meat pies falling from the sky had passed. Now it was Luo Nan's turn to make a move. With these springboards that could reach into the Blood Soul Temple of the Abyss region, it was very convenient for Luo Nan's mental senses to permeate inside. His pure observation mode was simply born for this sort of situation. This was, without a doubt, an opportunity to observe Madame Hard up close. It was completely different from the external observation of the mental sensing network. It couldn't even be considered clairvoyance. It was a direct touch and analysis. As long as he got a bit closer, but the more he observed, the more puzzled Luo Nan became. Where are the rules and order? Luo Nan believed that he would be able to see a strict logic and an exquisite structure within the core of Madame Hard's will. Only like this could she support a furnace, smelting the external pressure layer by layer, turning it into energy that she could absorb. Then she could distribute and utilize it. However, Luo Nan didn't see these things. At least, he didn't see them at first glance. He only saw endless and boundless negative emotions. The area far away from Madame Hard was like this. The area near her was still like this. And Madame Hard herself was like this as well. The closer he got to where Madame Hard's will was, the more he could sense her state within the stone forest and the magma lake. She wasn't a comer, but a confronter. Her own mental and physiological plane was surging and surging, and it was clearly displayed. Desire for power? Desire for destruction? These inflated emotions and desires were like enormous roaring waves. They came and went, and they even charged back into the stone forest and magma lake. They stirred up a maelstrom of undercurrents that churned endlessly. Luo Nan also saw Luo Nan. His weight in Madame Hard's heart was quite heavy. He had the effect of the mountain of bones, the configuration of thoughts, and a series of other factors. He had fear, yearning, greed, and other emotions mixed together. There was also an indescribably enormous shadow within Madame Hard's heart. It seemed to be born from external stimuli. It was similar to Luo Nan Qi, but on a much larger scale. Fear, despair, and other intense negative emotions were born from this. This caused Madame Hard to intentionally or unintentionally carry out some processing, causing her emotions to become hidden and dark. It was hard for Luo Nan to see any results no matter how much he observed her. But in any case, the Madame Hard in the Stone Forest and Magma Lake was far too different from the powerful woman that Luo Nan had observed and understood earlier. In this place, she was more like a crazy woman. She screamed at the extreme emotions of thousands upon thousands of believers, competing to see who was more greedy, more fearful, and more despairing. Could it be that her external appearance was just the embers of the lava lake after she vented her emotions? That didn't make sense. Wasn't her brain lacking oxygen from all this racket? How could she have the energy to scheme? Luo Nan was puzzled no matter how much he thought about it. He clearly felt that something was wrong. He tried to probe deeper with his mental senses through pure observation. This wasn't easy. Madame Hard's emotions were like a complex maze. They surged and churned, twisting and changing. Wanting to capture the so-called core was an extremely difficult matter. It was very easy to be led astray. Luo Nan tried again and again, but he was always a bit off. He was able to comprehend a certain principle from this. The mental world of a person wasn't much different from the vast and boundless physical world of space and time. This was especially true for a person like Madame Hard. She was violent and complex, and she was deep and boundless. It was practically impossible to reach the bottom in one go. But this didn't make sense. When the Wraith sign was in control, he clearly felt that the temperature of a certain area was much higher than the surrounding area. How could it be now? Oh, he understood. Luo Nan slapped the railing and came to a sudden realization. He couldn't blame anyone but himself. His pure observation mode did indeed allow him to probe deeper without any pressure, but how could he understand the heat of emotions like this? Using pure rational observation to probe into the level of emotions and desires was obviously incompatible. In other words, he needed to be scorched by the raging flames of Madame Hard's emotions and desires in order to grasp the crux of the matter. This was easy. He could start from nothing and slowly adjust. He could fumble for a level of intensity that could be sensed but wouldn't stimulate Madame Hard. The Wraith sign couldn't do this sort of delicate work, but he could do it for him. Luo Nan's expression suddenly changed just as he was testing things out. He subconsciously pressed his chest, but there was a rumbling roar in his ears. It was as if the roars of thousands upon thousands of people were forcefully shoved into his mind. He had a similar experience before, but this time it was different. This was because Luo Nan felt heat. This was a ball of irritable fire that was forcefully stuffed into his heart. It instantly swallowed up a small portion of his rational region. It made him restless and anxious, but there was also a willful and joyful feeling of recklessness that came from disregarding everything. Luo Nan's mind was a bit absent-minded in an instant. He wanted to sever the connection with Madame Hard's emotions and desires, but he hesitated to make a move. Someone called out softly by his ear at this time. "Mr. Luo? Mr. Luo?" "Oh, Sister Yuan." Luo Nan suddenly woke up. He knew that he had been in a daze for far too long. He hurriedly suspended his probing and turned around. He made a slight movement, and he discovered that a layer of cold sweat had appeared on his back. It stuck to his underwear, and the cold wind from the balcony blew in. It was cold and drenched. Even low-level instincts of desire had this sort of impact. "Mr. Luo, are you all right?" I'm fine." Luo Nan was a bit embarrassed that his soul had flown to the heavens time and time again, and he had always been mysterious. The problem was that the matters he had paid attention to and pondered over were far too private. It was very hard to tell others, and it would cause even more trouble if he did. Fortunately, He Yuan was the most considerate. She didn't make Luo Nan feel even more awkward. She just took out the results of her investigation of Li Yue's matter and asked Luo Nan to look over it. She gave a simple explanation. Through dissection and pathological analysis, the suspicious object within Li Yue's womb really doesn't belong to the category of a normal organism or tumor. The composition it contains should be quite complex. However, when it self-destructed, it first underwent a round of special poison contamination. Then it was placed under a high-temperature and high-pressure environment. Its original chemical structure was destroyed to the point of near extinction. It's very hard to find its nature and source. That's a chemical composition that only a mutant would produce. The so-called uterine leiomyoma is nothing more than a collector. Luo Nan directly revealed the answer. There was no need for him to hide this question any longer. He didn't say it before because his emotions were surging, and he wanted to send interference waves. He let it slip for a time. A collector? According to my observations, it should be something like this. Luo Nan was about to draw a simple diagram in the work area when he saw Mrs. Halder's sketch when he refreshed the page. He was stunned for a moment, and he resisted the urge to make changes with great difficulty. He flipped the page over. The shape of the parasitic mutant was roughly drawn in the newly created blank space. There was also a simple diagram of how it carried out its collection work within Li Yiwei's body. He had already simplified it as much as possible, but the diagram was still extremely complex. The chaotic lights from the balcony shone over. When the angle was changed slightly, it was simply like a demon painting was being created. Luo Nan was stunned when he shone under the lights. Chapter 686. Perhaps the virtual work area came with some animation effects. Under the illumination of the lights, the sketch of the parasitic mutant blended together with the fuzzy human frame. Its collecting tentacles replaced the positions of blood vessels and nerves, but they were unwilling to stay in their positions. They stretched out of the human frame and seemed to stretch out of the work area. They danced in the void. Luo Nan looked at his own work. He looked at those greedy and restless tentacles. He felt that there was something strange in his heart. It was like these tentacles were struggling and dancing. He was not unfamiliar with such a vague and bizarre feeling. It was just like when he used himself as an experiment earlier. Yes, he seemed to have taken drugs. Luo Nan had a bit of an idea as to why such a situation would occur. At this very moment, the irritable flames from the Blood Soul Temple of the Abyss District were still relentlessly invading him. The fuel of that flame was the extreme negative emotions of tens of thousands of people. He touched that environment and was affected by it. It was a bit like he was being assimilated. Fortunately, the situation was still under control. Luo Nan's thoughts were still very clear. His communication with He Yueyin wasn't affected. He pointed at the sketch and introduced the situation he knew. According to my observations, every time a third-stage mutant is added, it means that it can collect a bit more samples. It's hard to grasp how much is needed in order to satisfy it. After all, there are requirements for type and quantity, and the chemical composition produced by each infected person will overlap. Overlap. He Yueyin immediately grasped the key word. Luo Nan could only blink his eyes. If he told her about his arrangements 2,000 kilometers away, then he would be a bit too careless. Fortunately, He Yueyin never forced him to do anything. She turned her gaze to the chaotic dance of demons on the rooftop outside. There are 22 over here. That's 22 seeds. It should be very easy for them to blossom and bear fruit after being stimulated. Luo Nan responded without thinking. He discovered that He Yueyin's words didn't sound like an analysis, but more like an emotional sigh. That was right. He Yueyin had never faced the 22 small shrimps at the grand banquet. She faced the tens of thousands of potential infected people that were impossible to control with normal thinking. This number was far too excessive for anyone who maintained order. Luo Nan could feel the pressure He Yueyin's heart at this moment. But then again, how did this become her responsibility? The military, the government. Oh, those people were still in the dark. Luo Nan suddenly understood. He Yueyin had concealed the information of 10,000 potential infected people. In the end, she had shouldered a great deal of responsibility. But if that wasn't the case, how could the people from Quantum Corporation so easily jump out? Now that the situation was clear, why should he continue to bear the burden? Thinking to this point, Luo Nan blurted out, "Sister Yueyin, we can talk about this matter now." He Yueyin was startled, but with her intelligence, she quickly understood what was going on. She laughed involuntarily. I know, but we can still suppress it for now. Tens of thousands of people will crush some swingers. I already said he's a swingman. Luo Nen mumbled to himself. But he was really just saying it. After all, he was a standard dreg on the political level. There's no need to think too much about it. Everyone specializes in different fields, so their methods are different as well. Just leave these matters to us. Mr. Luo, you just have to inform us of the changes in time. This matter belongs to you. I'm afraid that the following period of time will be very tiring. We have to be prepared. Don't worry, Sister Yuan. He Yuan smiled faintly. She let out a light breath as the cool air blew over. The night wind ruffled her hair and made her squint her eyes. She looked like she was enjoying it very much. This was probably the most standard example of taking a break from the busy. Luo Nen knew that He Yuan was certainly working around the clock during the middle of the night. There were endless matters waiting for her. Putting himself in He Yuan's shoes, he felt a chill run down his spine. If he were to stand in He Yuan's position, he would most likely go crazy. Perhaps it would be admiration, sympathy, or even pity. Luo Nen suddenly wanted to help He Yuan ease a bit. Let's not talk about the specifics of the solution. Right now, it was good to be able to chat and relax. Yep, there was also him. He had been scorched by the intrusive raging flames. His mind was quite vexed. He didn't want to ponder over matters anymore. He just wanted to rest for a bit. Luo Nen waved his hand to extinguish the work area with this thought in mind. He leaned sideways against the balcony railing and adopted the posture of having a chat. But his emotions surged forth, and he was a bit dumbfounded. What should he talk about? The wristband on his wrist vibrated at this time. First, the watch with the garbled code lit up. It projected light under the control of a predetermined program, forming a three-dimensional region of all sorts of intertwined garbled codes in the space of an inch around his wrist. Then the garbled codes began to form an orderly puzzle. A portion of it formed a simple human silhouette, and the surrounding area was this person's name. It was a character that he had no impression of at all. The garbled codes rearranged themselves during this baffling time to form a complete leaderboard. The first person at the top was the fellow who had just been revealed by the garbled codes. Next to his name was an item called Number of Missions Completed. The number marked on it was 5. According to Luo Nan's understanding of the Grand Banquet, he was able to guess the reason why this brother was on the leaderboard. He had already caught 5 prey and branded them with a tattoo. Should he praise his superb skills for this kind of achievement, or should he use the phrase, quick shooter, to summarize it? In any case, the appearance of the hunt leaderboard caused the atmosphere on the rooftop to become even more fervent. The scene became even more, restless. Luo Nan turned his head halfway and swept a few glances towards the rooftop. He couldn't help but curl his lips and say, this group of people are really having fun. But they're good. They don't have to worry about anything, and they still need us to wipe their ass when they cause trouble. There are still 4 people on the rooftop. They're definitely not having fun anymore. He Yuan was referring to the seated players. It was impossible to allow this group of people to continue messing around, no matter how one looked at it. Luo Nan had already noticed a few ability users approaching without batting an eyelid as they spoke. They clearly wanted to completely control the remaining few. As for what sort of treatment they would enjoy after this, only the heavens knew. Luo Nan was amused when he saw this, but he soon came to a realization. Sister Yuan, you're trying to persuade me. I originally wanted to console you. Luo Nan didn't have time to say these words before he heard He Yuan say, are there any other harvesters besides Li Yiwei? Well, I'm really not too sure about this. Luo Nan was able to find Li Yiwei and the medical worker 2,000 kilometers away. Luck more or less played a role in this. He still needed to further research and ponder the principles of the night-level basic internal colonization biochemical reactor furnaces production, operation, and hiding of the parasites. The probability of it being a female might be a bit higher. After all, the size of the parasite isn't small. It's easier to be exposed if it's a male. Speaking of which, Li Yiwei's understanding of the parasite is quite subtle. Right now her consciousness has yet to recover. I've already asked Mr. Bai to come over and use the dream technique to try and dig out some information. Li Yiwei is certainly someone who knows, but she's someone who doesn't know everything. She certainly doesn't know that the parasite monster possesses a self-destruct mechanism. At the very least, she doesn't know what the self-destruct condition is. Luo Nen suddenly laughed in spite of himself as he spoke. Then he couldn't help burying his face into his elbow. Sister Yuan, I'm afraid there's nothing else for the two of us to talk about besides serious matters. He Yuan looked over in astonishment, then she pursed her lips into a smile. She took a step forward and used her elbow to support herself on the railing. She stood shoulder to shoulder with Luo Nan. She squinted her eyes as she welcomed the cool breeze. So you want to talk, huh? What do you want to talk about? Are you trying to coax me? In the end, it was rare for Luo Nan to see He Yuan in such a lively manner, so he decided to forgive her. Luo Nan hadn't truly thought of a good topic up until now. His meager life experience and taste were simply incapable of supporting a pure leisure style of chatting. In stark contrast to him, the group of people on the rooftop were playing to their heart's content. These people could play, knew how to play, and dared to play. Even the old-fashioned kiss cam was full of tricks. When a strong light beam shone on a designated group of people, it was hard to say what sort of eye-piercing scene would appear. Luo Nan's eyelids twitched as he watched. He slipped out a sentence, "Let's talk. Let's talk about these people. It's like I said just now. They're really having a good time." His gaze wandered across the rooftop. Actually, he didn't need his eyes. He could sense the wanton and unrestrained emotions and desires of this group of people purely through his senses. This even included the passive participants such as the models. Under the turbid flow of alcohol and drugs, all of their thoughts and burdens were drowned out. At the very least, he couldn't see any traces of them for the time being. Is this considered being carefree and without worries? Living a befuddled life is more appropriate. That's right. Luo Nan subconsciously sighed. Mr. Luo is envious. Huh. He Yuan turned around to look at him. I feel that Mr. Luo doesn't care about the enjoyment and treatment of these people. You only care about their relaxed and free state. Why can they live a befuddled life, while we have to face the cold wind and discuss these urgent and boring matters of life and death? Could it be that this isn't envy? No, I'm not envious. Luo Nan stared blankly for a few seconds before denying He Yuan's judgment. He unconsciously moved his fingers. It seemed that he wanted to draw a diagram in the void to guide his thoughts. But in the end, nothing took shape. So he could only say whatever came to his mind. I can only say that I'm curious. You know that I took drugs to alter my nervous system. Right now I'm not sensitive to alcohol, drugs, and so on. So I don't really understand this state. Can the pressure and burdens of a person's heart really be forgotten through this sort of method? Actually, I know the theory behind it. But emotions and desires really aren't things that can be controlled by rational thought. They have to be burned for a bit? Crap. I'm talking too messily. I understand. He Yuan also went to look at the scene of demons dancing chaotically on the rooftop. Her tone was completely different from Luo Nan's. Mr. Luo, it's true that your words are incoherent, but your emotions are very clear. Sometimes, a simple transmission of emotions is enough for a human interaction. Luo Nan blinked. What emotions? He Yuan no longer spoke. She just maintained her smile. This time it was Luo Nan's turn to understand. He laughed bitterly. Or is it envy? No, that's not right. Then he used an even more frank and harsh attitude to define himself. It's not envy. It's envy. Chapter 687. It was unknown which idiot had done it. Cam's tricks had actually been played with Luo Nan and He Yuan. When the lights focused on one's body, one would suddenly become the center of the world. The physiological and psychological states of people would inevitably undergo a certain degree of change. This involved instincts that had been passed down for millions of years. The only difference between people was whether they were more or less used to it. What's more, there were countless people clamoring. They screamed towards the balcony, Kiss. 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 Rip. Rip. From the perspective of the group of people on the rooftop, Hiyuan was undoubtedly a first-rate beauty. Luo Nan could be considered a fresh and tender youth. His beauty was naturally delicious. People were impatient to watch a restricted-level drama. It would be best if they could personally participate. However, the reactions of the two people on the balcony were rather cold. Luo Nan knew that he was a bit nervous and excited right now. His heartbeat had increased a bit, but this was far from enough to shake his mind. He had no intention to ponder over the complex physiological and psychological mechanisms within. He just followed his simple emotions. His fingers faced the strong light and streaked across the rooftop. 99% of the people here are older than me. Sister Yuan, you're actually quite young. You're at least 50% younger than the people here. Why can they be like this, but we have to be like this? Why can they use this method to be happy, but I can't experience it at all? Yes, I can experience it. In comparison, Mrs. Halder seemed to be a bit more pleasing to the eye. At the very least, she did things with great difficulty. She bore pressure that was unimaginable to outsiders. Luo Nan could understand this method, but he couldn't understand the group of people below him. He tried to place himself in their shoes, but he couldn't find any pleasure. He just felt a bit of envy and jealousy towards that state. Hiyuan's voice didn't change at all under the strong light. On one hand, it's because we can see a level that others are unable to imagine. We can also see the danger that is clearly far away, but it seems to be coming in the blink of an eye. Actually, Mr. Luo, you can relax and even indulge at any time. It's very rare to see an ascetic monk like you in the community of ability users. Vision and enjoyment are never contradictory. If you can solve problems by saving minutes and seconds, then a crisis wouldn't be called a crisis. Cough. A crisis or something. On the other hand, perhaps it's guilt. I feel that I have made mistakes, that I can do better, and that the gap between reality and theory is unforgivable. I want to fill in the gaps and flaws, and then torture myself over and over again. Luo Nan felt that the atmosphere was a bit strange. Right now it seemed that Hiyuan was no longer consoling him, but some other element was mixed in. He turned his head to look. Under the strong light, Hiyuan's side profile was fair and pure to the point of being practically flawless. Her calm and reserved bearing was extremely in line with Luo Nan's aesthetics. This should have been a very pleasing scene, but in the end, he couldn't ignore the tossing and turning clamoring of those people on the rooftop. Many people felt disappointed because of Luo Nan and Hiyuan's serious lack of cooperation. For the sake of stirring up the atmosphere, their mouths became more and more unrestrained. Luo Nan could only sigh in regards to this. It's fine if I torture myself, but now this group of people has come. Sister Yuan, right now I feel that letting this group of people play merrily makes my heart feel really bad. So Luo Nan let the few sparks that were leaping in his heart collide with the ointment that continued to accumulate and mutate in the depths of his body and mind. In the blink of an eye, the ointment exploded into flames, burning both inside and out. I've really had enough. Luo Nan muttered to himself. He cast his gaze towards the rooftop once more. Before his eyes was the glaring light and the malevolent and warped faces. His ears were filled with clamorous noise, and his mental sensing network gathered muddy emotions and desires. The three most important sensing channels merged into one, creating a grotesque and dazzling space together. This preposterous space was trying to swallow him up, to make him dance according to the terrible rules within, to smear the terrible ointment onto his body. Dream on. So Luo Nan faced the light and faced the several hundred gazes that were focused on him. He raised his hand and crossed his arm, making a classic umbrella gesture. He didn't conceal his emotions in the slightest. It was the equivalent of a blazing torch that was thrown directly into the boiling pot of oil of desire on the rooftop. Boom. The obscenities and vulgarities piled up and expanded far too much in a short amount of time, to the point that the details were completely lost. All that was left were clamorous howls. If Luo Nan wanted to, of course he could distinguish every single detail. But what was the point? His telepathic thoughts radiated out, triggering interference waves in passing. A second later, the powerful lights operating smoothly under the lighting control system suddenly went out of control. They were like incorporeal sharp swords. They hacked and chopped randomly on the rooftop, sweeping through warped faces one after another. Occasionally, they would pass through some dirty corners, drawing even more curses from people. "You're crazy, lighting engineer. Bullshit. What the hell is this? *CK. Hurry up and extinguish the lights." "Okay, extinguish them." Luo Nan complied with their request, extinguishing the chaotic lights. Everything. Luo Nan snapped his fingers, and the rooftop that was surrounded by lights suddenly sank into darkness. At this time, even the wristbands and other electronic products that everyone wore could forget about lighting up. Of course, it wasn't to the extent of being completely dark and lightless. The light pollution of the city could more or less help, but the intense change in light and dark environment had already exceeded the upper limits of many people's minds. Some women were screaming, and there were vague curses mixed within. There was also the rather awkward sound of someone falling into the water. The entire rooftop was a chaotic mess, and the corresponding emotions were converging towards the same direction. People would naturally form uneasy interpretations of things they couldn't understand. Perhaps they wouldn't be able to use their brains in a rush, but the darkness would help them think, or let their imaginations run wild. "Mr. Luo." "Sister Yuan?" "Yeah, it's nothing." In the end, Yuan didn't continue speaking. Luo Nan took it as her acknowledgement. So Luo Nan leaned on the railing with his elbow. He watched everything with interest and a clear conscience. He savored the novel feeling in his heart. Luo Nan had never experienced this sort of situation before. He didn't have a clear goal. He didn't have a definite direction. Perhaps this was just a prank? Speaking of which, what was a prank again? He habitually took this opportunity to reflect a bit. If he analyzed it according to Mrs. Halder's and Ian Lee's masks, then what kind of mask was he using right now? A mask of weakness? A mask of strength? Plausible but not. A mask of rationality? Come on, where was rationality right now? Luonan felt a bit dizzy. This vaguely overlapped with his memories of his early days of secretly drinking with Mo Peng. But when he carefully examined the roots, it was a very new thing. It was like an ignorant and restless existence was born from a corner of his heart. It sprouted and collided with the chaotic reactions of the surroundings, mutually intertwining and absorbing nutrients. Gradually, it became a few basic reactions, taking shape and strengthening. Luo Nan wasn't clear on the specifics, and he didn't want to think too much about it. He felt that this was quite good. It was quite relaxing. He didn't need to think too deeply. He just needed to follow the itch. Yes, it was like scratching an itch. He just needed to find a comfortable strength and use his strength. It was also at this moment that the Wraith Sign, who was leading the invasion of the Blood Soul Temple in the Abyss District, seemed to sense the situation over here. It gave Luo Nan a sidelong glance. Luo Nan had never understood this demon. He didn't understand this fellow's reactions at all. He didn't understand where this fellow's actions came from. But right now, with this sudden sidelong glance, Luo Nan was shone upon by the demonic pupils of a different color. He suddenly understood. At least he understood a bit. This chaotic fellow seemed to be very excited. It was precisely this state that was transmitted over to Luo Nan. Luo Nan was able to grasp the information contained within. The Wraith Sign didn't possess intelligence, but it possessed a gluttonous instinct. It could be called aesthetic appreciation. From its perspective, the emotions and desires of living creatures were ingredients. Ingredients were divided into quality and coarse. Cooking techniques were also divided into high and low levels. In its eyes, its master, Luo Nan, was perhaps a savage who only knew how to hunt and gather. Even if he did occasionally plant crops, he did so freely. His harvests were all unprocessed. They were carelessly eaten, and they tasted terrible. Though the quality of the ingredients didn't improve, a certain someone finally had some self-awareness. So hungry, foodie, Luo Nan experienced the emotional state of the Wraith Sign. He felt that it was even more interesting in his mind. There was also inspiration. He clearly received inspiration. He patted the railing and decided to experiment with this new method. Luo Nen faced the darkness of the rooftop, as well as the restless emotions that frantically spread and grew within the darkness. Luo Nen let out a breath, but at the same time he made everyone on the rooftop temporarily stop breathing. Hush! Quiet down. Listen to me. Luo Nen didn't deliberately raise his voice. How could he make several hundred people listen to him? Well, it was actually quite simple. His soul strength interfered with the plane of reality and sealed everyone's nose and mouth. At the same time, his interference strength was enough to guarantee that everyone could hear his words. He was practically speaking into the ears of everyone on the rooftop. The rooftop instantly quieted down quite a bit. There were no other sounds, but there were even more intense sounds of struggle. The clanging sounds of tables and chairs being overturned lingered in the ears. And these noises quickly subsided. All that was left was Luo Nan's voice and will flowing within the darkness. Frankly speaking, you've provoked me. You've made me very unhappy. Of course, being happy isn't something I'm good at. I understand the opposite. Then, as a greeting and also as a form of revenge, I can convey to you the things I'm good at. From now on, I want you to shut your mouths and not breathe. I want you to howl in pain. I want you to beg for forgiveness from fear. Oh, if you think of this darkness in the future, I'll allow you to think of me. My name is Luo Nan. I'm a fellow who doesn't really know how to joke around. He Yuan looked over in a daze from the side. In the back, Qin Ikuan and Gao also looked through the glass door. They maintained their stupefied posture. Even further away, there were different people using different methods to watch this preposterous live broadcast. Luo Nan knew all of this clearly, but he didn't care at all. He only paid attention to the countless flames of emotions within the darkness. The turbid flow of the mental plane transformed into a long river of flames that flowed with oil. However, the long river of flames didn't flow outwards. Instead, it formed a whirlpool. Or perhaps it was just the swirling oil in the wok, roaring and roasting within the raging flames. The aroma of the food was nothing more than this. As for what was roasted, whether or not it would cause a fundamental change in the raw ingredients. Chapter 688. In the corridor of a certain floor of Aurora Cloud City, it was already around 3 in the morning. The banquet that should have been in full swing had been forcefully interrupted, and this place appeared empty and cold. Occasionally, a few waiters could be seen, but all of them were listless, as if they were still mourning over the tips that had flown away. Even a dazzling beauty like Zhang Yingying who passed by could not raise her interest. Zhang Yingying didn't have any opinion on passers-by. She just did her job of leading the way. "Mr. Bai, this way please." "Io, don't be so polite. Seeing you like this makes my heart tremble." The middle-aged Mr. White's eyes narrowed as he smiled. He walked with his hands behind his back, looking as humorous as ever. He asked casually, "How's the situation over there?" As for Fei Jin, she's probably still unconscious. She's just a temporary vessel for her soul, so she should be easier to deal with than Li Wei. I'm talking about Luo Nan. How is he? I heard that his temperament changed drastically and he threw a tantrum? I've had enough fun, so I'm sleeping. Sigh, Mr. Bai, why don't you treat that kid while you're at it? His condition tonight is really abnormal. Mr. Bai's eyes twitched. What kind of stupid idea is this little girl coming up with? Although I'm old and unfilial, I'm still living a good life. I haven't lived long enough these days. Luo Nan and the others were in the room up ahead. Bamboo Pole was leaning against the wall outside, smoking. He saw Mr. Bai and Zhang Yingying, and he waved his hand from afar as a greeting. Zhang Yingying ignored him and only looked at Mr. Bai. Do you want your life just to see a doctor? Where are the medical ethics? Mr. Bai said confidently, don't talk about morality. Let's look at the feasibility first. My dream invasion technique, to put it bluntly, is to steal some materials from the human mind and build a seemingly right but actually wrong little maze or something, confusing people and making them think that it is their own work. Then, they will take the initiative to follow the maze and replace the beam with the pillar. The problem is, some people's materials are straw, which is light and easy to use. But others' materials are large rocks, which are hard to move and can cause a sprain on their back. If they are not careful, they might even lose their lives. Tell me, Luo Nan, Boss Luo, and Professor Luo, are they using thatch or boulders? What kind of nonsense is this? That's right, that's the principle. While they were arguing, Bamboo Pole had already put out his cigarette with a smile. He pushed open the door for them and gestured for them to enter. Zhang Yingying took the lead. She had already taken a few steps into the room when she realized that something was wrong. She turned around and saw Mr. Bai standing outside the door. He was looking left and right, his face full of expressions. Hey, what's wrong now? Mr. White coughed twice. Let's negotiate. We can examine the carrier, but can we move it out first? Inside the room, the two bodyguards, Qin Ikuin and Gauda, stood in a corner. He Yueyin was operating the virtual work area, giving orders to everyone. Hearing the noise, they all raised their heads. At that moment, Mr. Bai's face turned serious. He poked his head into the room again, and his wrinkles appeared on his old face. It's like this. Don't you feel bored? Really? Zhang Yingying blinked. He Yueyin subconsciously shifted her gaze. Luo Nan's body was curled up on the sofa across from her. He was sleeping soundly, facing the backrest. He was completely unresponsive to the sounds of the outside world. At this time, Mr. Bai waved at her. Come out and talk. And you guys? He called out the few people in the room who were awake. At the same time, he called out to the Psychic Wave Network maintenance team of Shangding Building. Help me pull up the interference field diagram of the area. A few seconds later, the relevant results were sent back and shared with Mr. Bai in the mission channel. Right now the room has been turned into a pot of porridge by someone's soul strength. You guys don't even notice a thing? It was as if the dynamic image of the disordered magnetic field lines was fine, but He Yuan's eyes focused on several key data. Her brows unconsciously locked together. Bamboo Pole clapped his hands and said in hindsight, no wonder my smoking addiction flared up. So it was because I wasn't feeling well in the room. My subconscious wanted to come out and take a breather. Zhang Yingying curled her lips at him. Mr. Bai actually nodded in agreement. It's very possible. Vice President He and Ikuin, who have been with that person for a long time, have received an even more intense and direct impact. They are no longer sensitive to the subsequent effects. He Yuan's gaze pointed straight ahead. Mr. Luo, what's the situation right now? Do you have a clear judgment? He's dreaming. When it came to the field he was most proficient in, Mr. Bai replied straightforwardly, his cerebral cortex should be extremely active. The information stored in his brain region is continuously being excavated and reorganized. Moreover, it is constantly producing new things. Since his soul strength is too powerful, there is a corresponding power radiating out, but he unconsciously controls it. It's fine if he doesn't control it, because the power will naturally scatter. It's precisely because he subconsciously controls it that it forms a meaningful building. Yes, it's popular to call it format, right now. You guys have been inside for a long time, and you're also in a clear-headed state, so you're completely unaware. However, if your mind isn't clear and you're in a daze, it's very likely that you'll be pulled into a dream. He has that ability. Zhang Yingying's teeth hurt from listening to this. What kind of situation is this? He Yuan immediately followed up with a question, will this harm Mr. Luo? Mr. Bai spread his hands. I really don't know. If I had to say, what harm would there be from dreaming? For normal people, this is true, but it might be a different matter for ability users. Basically, I believe that dreaming is a sort of adjustment of one's memories, information, and even emotions. Ability users usually organize the structure of their body and soul appropriately. That's why they rarely dream, or maybe they dream for a very short amount of time. There's a saying that the most powerful have no dreams. This is the reasoning behind it. Luo Nan is really strong. Zhang Yingying followed up with a sentence. Yeah, he's really strong. However, everyone knows that the structure of the body and soul is out of balance. Even with the adjustment of awakening, it's hard to say what the effect will be. Plus, his mood tonight is clearly different from usual. This could bring about variables. Mr. Bai explained as he tried to release his soul strength to probe the chaotic dream magnetic field within the room. He wanted to gather more concrete information. His tone gradually changed as he spoke in a dreamlike manner. He's currently in a period of adjustment, but he's adjusting a bit too frequently. He's endlessly digging and flipping through his memories. Oh, it's like there's a large amount of information continuously stimulating him. This stimulation is very direct, so there are very few logical things, but his nervous system is abnormally excited. Mr. Bai's voice was cut off. The color on his face wasn't too good. He looked a bit dizzy, like he wanted to vomit but couldn't. He can't go too deep. It's like a whirlpool. Plus, the touch has high temperature and pressure. It might even kill someone. It's weird. This doesn't seem like he's organizing material. It's more like he's stewing in a pot. What kind of toy can be stewed? Mr. Bai was on the mental side, and Bamboo Pole was the only other person here. Zhang Yingying turned her head to look at him. Bamboo Pole spread his hands, expressing his helplessness. He was completely blind to the structure of the dream. After all, every profession had its own specialization. Not everyone could be like Luo Nan, who could adjust the frequency of his soul strength at any time and cut into different planes at any time. Bamboo Pole could only offer a suggestion. How about we be a bit more direct and rough? Just wake him up? I've read some information. Being disturbed during the REM period of a dream won't cause too many negative effects. Mr. Bai was a bit hesitant. All relevant theories will be discounted by ability users. Mr. Luo has a precedent of sleepwalking. He Yuan was referring to the incident with the 2000th miss. Luo Nan was highly nervous. He didn't sleep for dozens of hours in a row. In the end, he was both mentally and physically exhausted. He only fell asleep after injecting drugs. Then he assumed a strange posture in his half-asleep, half-awake state. It was very frightening. He Yuan wasn't there at the time, but Qin Ikuan and Gauda were there. They nodded their heads in confirmation. Mr. Bai furrowed his brows as he listened. He thought for a bit and walked into the room quietly. He approached Luo Nan and probed Luo Nan's breathing and other vital signs. The others followed him in when they saw him enter the room. How is it? His breathing isn't stable enough. His body's surface temperature is high. His muscle tone is abnormal. It really is a bit of RBD. Oh, it's the characteristics of REM sleep behavior disorder. But a more direct conclusion should be that his skeleton is under a certain amount of pressure. After all, the soul strength in the dream isn't easy to control. Mr. Luo himself doesn't seem to have completely resolved the problem of balance between his body and soul structure. We can't rule out the possibility of losing control and pressurization. Then we need to wake him up as soon as possible? The problem right now is that with his perceptual abilities and his current interference with the surrounding area, he actually hasn't sensed us at all when we surround him and talk. Mr. Bai shook his head with a bitter smile. He could only use the cautiousness of a doctor to make a suggestion. We need to wake him up. But we need to consider the possibility of losing control of his soul strength when the dream collapses. I can try to guide him, but from the current situation, his body's reaction is quite intense. His biological instincts are currently in an active state. The RBD of an ability user really isn't something to be trifled with. We also need to be careful not to let him injure himself. The group of people looked at each other in dismay. They didn't understand much of Mr. Bai's words, but they all understood the meaning of "I'm not sure." At this time, everyone had already completely forgotten about Fei Jin, who was in the bedroom. Who would have thought that the main character wouldn't even get a turn during a routine inspection? Instead, an even more important character would have a problem. He Yuan pondered for a long time before finally speaking. Mr. Bai, the problem right now is largely due to the imbalance between the body and soul structure, right? To be precise, it's the control method that maintains the balance between the body and soul structure. There's a possibility of losing control in the dream. What we need to do right now is to eliminate this possibility. Okay, I'll make a call. Hiyuan spoke and then walked to the side. She was in the corner of the room, talking to the person on the other end. After the call was connected, she gave a very direct introduction to Luo Nan's situation. Then she began to listen, only occasionally saying a few words. This continued for 5 or 6 minutes before she suddenly shifted her gaze. Mr. Bai. What? It's a problem related to guidance. Can you allow information from the outside world to be poured into Mr. Luo's dream more accurately? Well, what kind of information is it? Chapter 689. This was Mr. Bai's job. No matter how special the situation was or how difficult it was, he wouldn't shirk from it. Hiyuan immediately shared the call with Mr. Bai, allowing the other side to communicate directly with Mr. Bai. This was to avoid any miscommunication. Mr. Bai listened very seriously. At the same time, he made a judgment to see if the plan on the other side would really work. As a doctor, he would speak without hesitation if he had any doubts. He would then consider the matter further. However, things went surprisingly smoothly. The man on the other side had a hoarse and deep voice that sounded intermittent, as if he was seriously ill. But the plan he spoke of was rooted in the foundation of an already confirmed domain. The logic was tight, and the veins were connected. What was even rarer was that he had a very deep understanding of Luo Nan's body and soul. He spoke of some details, and Mr. Bai, who was present, immediately made comparisons. He had a sudden realization. After a few discussions, the wrinkles in the corners of Mr. Bai's eyes loosened. In the end, he simply took off his jacket as he spoke. He loosened his sleeves and began to adjust his breathing. He was going to act according to the plan designed by the other side. This. How should I address you? Xiao? Oh, I know. So it's Gym Master Xiao. Mr. Bai secretly praised, a great teacher produces a great student. It was no wonder that Luo Nan had said a few good words for him, the martial arts teacher, during his public lecture. Luo Nan was indeed worthy of it. The pleasantries stopped at a certain point. Everyone knew what was important and what was urgent. Mr. Bai immediately gestured to Hiyuan to let go of the bracelet she wore for the time being. Hiyuan didn't say much. She did as she was told. Mr. Bai took the bracelet and placed it next to Luo Nan's ear, fixing it in place. He used the shared communication device to communicate with the person in the distance. They adjusted the pace together. There was no need for him to say anything. The others in the room consciously backed away. They all held their breaths, afraid of disturbing Mr. Bai and Gym Master Xiao's joint treatment. Qin Ikuin was careful. She pulled God, and the two of them guarded the door. Qin Ikuin deliberately went to the bedroom to watch the unconscious Fei Jin and put an end to any possible mishaps. Mr. Bai slowly exhaled. The sound seemed to echo in the silent room. After adjusting his breathing, he softly said, "Hall Master Xiao, let's begin." The change did not happen immediately. It was only when Mr. White's voice faded away and the air became still again that a slight vibration appeared. It had a weak effect on the air. Everyone present was an ability user. Their senses were sharp, and they could all hear a wave of low and deep sound coming from the earring. From the sound of it, there seemed to be ups and downs, a rhythm and a turning point. It felt like there was a clear meaning to it. However, if one tried to identify it carefully, they would not be able to understand the details at all. It was like the chanting of Buddhist scriptures in the temple, which had been reconstructed and recombined in its unique rhythm. Zhang Yingying's eyelids twitched. For some reason, she had some impression of this sound wave, but she couldn't find the source. No matter what, this was not a good time to ask questions. She could only endure and suppress the anxiety of not being able to help at all. She stared at how Mr. Bai was going to deal with this. Mr. Bai's eyes slightly widened. They seemed to be closed yet not closed. His body swayed. He was like an old man in the middle of the night who could fall asleep at any time. And this was the sign of the activation of the dream entrance technique, which he relied on to become famous. His entire body was in a nearly relaxed state, and his soul's strength permeated into the surrounding dreamland magnetic field, using it as a medium for the sound wave to vibrate and transmit. What he needed to do next was to ensure that this sound wave maintained its original nature as much as possible during the process of transmission and reception. He wanted to preserve the original message. And because of this, Mr. Bai was able to understand the basic message transmitted by this sound wave from Xiao Shenyu earlier. It was a set of sentences. My heart is like a prison, my heart is like a furnace. My heart is like a mirror, my heart is like a country. It was as if Luo Nan was wandering through a long and chaotic gallery. Front, back, left, right, and even above his head and below his feet were piled up with paintings of thick ink and heavy colors. Even if they were paintings, Luo Nan wouldn't be able to find a clear concept to correspond with. The color structure of these paintings clearly destroyed ordinary aesthetic perception. Some were abstract, some were filled with metaphors, and some were the direct expression of emotions. Luo Nan could only understand them this way. In fact, he didn't understand anything at all. He only saw the chaotic structure and colors piled up layer by layer, filling his field of vision. He couldn't sort out a basic logic, but he was also unable to reject the corresponding perception. He could only allow the lowest level of intuition to passively accept all of this. He didn't care whether or not it would cause a misunderstanding. He just wanted to swallow it whole. The problem was that this gallery was really too big, and it didn't give him any sense of direction. There was only an endless pile of paintings. In the end, it was as if someone was forcefully pulling open his eyelids and pouring those dazzling colors into his eyes. At the same time, there was a physical stimulation that seemed to melt into his blood vessels at any time. Every color brought warmth, smell, and taste. And every stimulation required him to make an instinctive and emotional response. These stimuli didn't have any logical connection to speak of. Perhaps the same color, the same structure, but when stuffed in at different times, it would give him a completely different feeling. Luo Nan instinctively felt danger, but before he could understand what danger was, the illogical information had already stuffed all of his reaction pathways. He was completely lost in this place. He was like a drunkard who had been completely drunk. He only wanted to close his eyes, cut off all information from entering his body, and fall into a deep sleep. At this time, there was no use of willpower. There was only the instinct of his body. When he was tired, he would sleep. When he was sleepy, he would sleep. As for whether he would wake up or not after sleeping, how could he know such a complicated matter? He was numb. He was completely numb. Even if the heavens fell and the earth cracked. Wait a minute. It seemed that his surroundings really were shaking. Luo Nan was able to sense it. It wasn't because of how intense the shaking was. Instead, it was because under the stimulation of the inexhaustible and disorderly structure of colors and body sensations, the shaking was so neat and orderly. And it was so familiar. It was like a hook that probed into the depths of his soul, pulling out an entire string of information and memories that had been buried deep under the disorderly and chaotic ruins. This wasn't a particularly high-end or complicated matter. On the contrary, it was more of a neural reflex process that Luo Nan was already familiar with. It wasn't an instinct, but it was close to instinct. Luo Nan just triggered a bit of a bud, and then a whole set of reactions began to operate spontaneously. The chaotic and numb reaction pathways suddenly opened up a vein that was born due to the law. Then it extended all the way down. There's vibration, muscles. From this moment on, Luo Nan clearly captured his own inherent organs and even his fuzzy self-perception. It was like a network node that was constantly vibrating, spreading its special frequency layer by layer. From this, Luo Nan sensed a dense neural network. He sensed his blood vessels and tendons. He sensed his bones, flesh, skin, and hair. He sensed his 5 viscera and 6 bowels. In the end, he sensed his entire body. It was like a gear set that had malfunctioned. It struggled amidst the chaos and disorder. There were obstructions. But with the introduction of special vibrations, a habitual rhythm that wasn't instinctive but was close to instinctive took the upper hand once more. Heart, liver, spleen, lungs, and kidneys. Ears, eyes, mouth, nose, and tongue. This was the art of 9 orifices and 6 roots that Luo Nan had been bitterly practicing for the past few months. Under Gym Master Xiu's supervision, Luo Nan had already treated this cultivation method as a natural part of his life. He didn't make any special plans, but walking, sitting, lying down, observing, smelling, and touching were all part of his cultivation. Up to this point, the art of body gear came from sensing his senses, the rotation of his internal organs, and the construction of his body and skeleton. It was meaningless to emphasize the exquisiteness of the art of 9 orifices and 6 roots under these circumstances. However, Luo Nan was able to further strengthen his memories from the gradual formation of this operating mechanism. At the same time, he dug out the foundation of the laws and rules of his life. His consciousness, which was still operating with difficulty, formed a short but clear and correct logic. With the body gear, there should be a corresponding God gear. The body gear and God gear interacted with each other through coupling, forming the rules and order of his body and soul structure. God gear. God gear. The order of soul strength on the mental plane. The clattering sound of chains rang out. There seemed to be someone whispering into Luo Nan's ear amidst the unique rhythm. It was a familiar rhythm. It was a familiar abbreviation. Even if there were some distortions, Luo Nan was still able to analyze the information within. My heart is like a prison. My heart is like a furnace. My heart is like a mirror. My heart is like a country. The 16-word chant that originated from his grandfather took root in Luo Nan's body, soul, and neural network. Then it touched upon the mental plane and soul strength. Luo Nan's body and soul structure were slowly and firmly changed through 5 years of pure and extreme experimentation with drugs on his own body. It wasn't Luo Nan's innate talent, but it clearly showed the most essential rules and order of his existence. He was born as a human. Order was the cornerstone of his existence. It was the most precious thing. When Luo Nan had this realization in his mind, the heavily chained crow emerged from nothingness. It came from the depths of his heart, causing his body's prison format to manifest clearly. It acted internally. The coupling interference of the body gear and God gear returned to stability. A domain of rules was drawn for Luo Nan. It acted externally. The Wraith sign. Luo Nan's willpower and emotions exploded at the same time. Your King rebelling. Right now, Luo Nan was like a fisherman steering a boat on the surface of a hurricane. The body and soul system constructed by the laws was like a small dinghy. It carried him up and down within the boundless and chaotic storm of emotions and desires. He could be annihilated at any time. But even so, he still projected the heavily chained crow. He used the other end to firmly lock that malevolent and incorporeal wraith. He had to get to the bottom of this no matter what. What is this fellow doing in the end? The Wraith sign appeared within the boundless elements of chaos. Unexpectedly, the Wraith only curled up under the binding of the heavily chained crow. It was dispirited and listless. It didn't show any signs of resistance or backlash. But even so, there was still violent and berserk energy radiating from its body. It forcibly passed through the heavily chained crow that was designed as a one-way channel. It transmitted a terrifying high temperature that could burn the soul. Chapter 690. Luo Nan had already firmly controlled the Wraith sign. The heavily chained crow's control over this demon was no different from any of the previous times. The Wraith sign was indeed obedient. There really wasn't any rebellious situation. The Wraith sign was still the Wraith sign, but the wave after wave of high temperature was real. Now Luo Nan knew that this was a crazy storm of emotions and desires. Its intensity directly crushed the stone forest and magma lake of the Blood Soul Temple in the Abyss region. It was larger, more restless, more extreme. So Luo Nan compared it to a hurricane wreaking havoc in the ocean. The obvious truth was that this power originated from the Wraith sign. It originated from the chaotic and disorderly main body of the Wraith sign. It was just that Luo Nan had never understood it. It wasn't something that could be understood. Using reason to touch emotions and desires was basically like a chicken talking to a duck. One would never be able to feel its power. It was just like how the cloud world and the local spacetime were separated by a thin and hazy membrane of spacetime. It was enough to make the billions of people on the planet turn a blind eye to it. The abyss region and the plane of reality were muddled together in a certain sense, but they coexisted peacefully under the natural moat of the mental and the material. Now Luo Nan personally experienced the burning power of emotions and desires. He knew how to interpret it, and this membrane was pierced through. The power of another dimension was truly transmitted over. The transmission of this power was the unceasingly rising temperature of the heavily chained crow. It posed a more fundamental question to Luo Nan. The heavily chained crow clearly controlled the wraith sign. Why couldn't it control the power within the wraith sign's body? There seemed to be some sort of difference between the wraith sign and the power of the wraith sign. As for where the difference was, crackle! The high temperature and pressure transmission of the heavily chained crow formed an even more direct stimulation and threat to the structure of Luo Nan's body and soul. Luo Nan himself didn't know how to deal with it, but a certain element within his brain reacted a step ahead. The external neuron, this special creation, suddenly became lively. It continued to radiate bright and splendid electric flames. Speaking of which, the external neuron was attached to the heavily chained crow. It was connected to Luo Nan's self-format. How could the wraith sign's powerful transmission of berserk energy not stimulate it? This was great. It really was a collision between the virtual brain system and the wraith sign system. Luo Nan suddenly recalled something. His mind temporarily moved away from the wraith sign and entered the virtual brain interface. As expected, the changes in the outside world were timely reflected in this magical visual interface, and the extent of the changes was beyond imagination. At the center of the virtual brain interface, inside the outline of the virtual brain that looked like a cluster of galaxies, billions of stars were gathered. However, they were flashing at different frequencies. Their positions were even shifting, showing unprecedented turbulence, as if they were experiencing an unexpected interstellar storm. The mysterious structure of the character that was hidden inside, on the other hand, still maintained the same sense of order and hierarchy. Even if some of the stars and sectors were displaced, the structure would still be slightly adjusted as a whole, and the stability of the structure would always be maintained. It was very marvelous. After looking for a long time, Luo Nan vaguely jumped out from the structure of the mysterious I character. He let the structure of this activity revert to the comical dancing posture of his grandfather and father's photo. That's right. It really was like a god formed from millions and millions of stars was dancing amidst the violent interstellar storm. It also displayed a wonderful balance and coordination within the motion. Luo Nan's mind inexplicably became much clearer when he saw this scene. He was able to observe many more details. He noticed that there were 8 groups of rune structures surrounding the core image of the dancing god. They were the shoulders, the palms, the chest, the back, the top of the head, the soles of the feet, and so on. They were originally rather indistinct, but under the blowing of the interstellar storm, it was as if a layer of sand and dirt had been shaken off during the dancing posture. The fineness of the structure actually increased clearly, and more information flowed and transmitted wherever the eye could see. It might be said that Luo Nan understood something in an instant. It was just a subtle feeling. But it was precisely by following this feeling that his observation perspective completed a complete transformation without him realizing it. Luo Nan's field of view was pulled closer in his absent-minded state, probably because he was overly focused on the surrounding rune structure. Luo Nan's direction also changed. He was originally looking from the outside to the inside, but now he was looking from the inside to the outside. That's right. The current Luo Nan suddenly merged with the dancing god within the virtual brain galaxy. He turned his body within the intense interstellar storm, changing his angle of view, and cast his gaze towards the 8 floating and circulating rune structures around him. He experienced the details that he had previously overlooked. This sort of fusion wasn't particularly unfamiliar. Luo Nan's large coordinate system was constructed in a similar manner. But the corresponding dynamic changes, as well as the penetrating intuition that was closely related to the fineness of the surrounding 8 runes, gave him a wonderful confidence that he could understand many things. It was under the catalysis of this confidence that Luo Nan's gaze cast even further away. It cast itself towards the wraith shadow that was suddenly restless under the constraints of the virtual brain system. The wraith sign was still reflected within the virtual brain's interface right now, but it was no longer in the grayish hue of before. It was as if the wraith sign had come to life within this interface. Its 8 claws moved, and it wandered within the dark void. Bewildering and nearly muddy light flowed up and down its entire body, so much so that it concealed its signature 6 extraordinary pupils. Luo Nan stared at the wraith sign. He stared at the dazzling radiance, but what inexplicably projected into his mind was a shadow. That's right, a shadow. If one only lowered their head to look, they would only be able to see the grayish silhouette of this nothingness. No matter how much one studied it, it would be the same. But if one were to shift their thoughts and shift their gaze, one would be able to see the standing tree that the shadow was clinging to. If one walked further up, one would be able to trace the source of the radiant radiance, and one would be able to see an incomparably enormous fireball. Luo Nan's thoughts came to a standstill for a moment before he was able to continue his understanding. It was a sun that erupted with high-temperature jets at all times. It silently rolled within the abyss of the distant spacetime. It surged with scorching heat, but it was negligible in comparison to its own power. It passed through some sort of opaque frame substance to finally form the wraith sign, a certain shadow that reflected a portion of the wraith sign structure and a deeper essence. The thing reflected by the wraith sign was very grand, but it was precisely because of this that it set off its lowly nature all the more. Forgive Luo Nan for describing it this way, for he simply did not know how this understanding came to be. It was as if there was a large amount of secret information that truly existed, yet it was hard to perceive. The information blended together with a special logic to form an answer in his mind. This was, without a doubt, a cognitive process that allowed him to directly pry into the secrets of heaven. Luo Nan was willing to maintain his muddled state, to sever this cognitive vein. Child of the Order of Justice once said, "Observation is order, and order is truth." This referred to the cognitive process itself. It was a transformation of the external world by the self-format. Luo Nan had once taught a class and changed these words. He used them to describe the prison theory on the mental plane. The scale was a bit larger. Contact was invasion. This description was certainly very refreshing when used on the strong. But the problem was that all effects were two-way. If Luo Nan did not know all of this, he would have remained in a state of ignorance towards the essence of the wraith sign and the source of its energy. He would not have experienced the storm of emotions and desires. He would have been an insulator. All he needed to do was fiddle with the low-end little shadow that was the wraith sign every day. But now, due to various lucky coincidences and the upgrade of some cognitive abilities that he did not understand at all, he was actually able to see through the phenomenon to see the essence. He was able to open up an entire meridian. At the same time, he also understood how to connect with the power of emotions and desires. As a result, all the obstacles in this path were completely shattered. The terrifying storm that came from the distant abyss of space-time descended with a rumble. It was as if a red-hot iron needle had been inserted into Luo Nan's brain at this moment. The needle was none other than the external neuron that could bear a sudden increase in pressure. Fortunately, this marvelous creation roamed between the mental plane and the material plane. It possessed its own set of operating mechanisms. When the pressure it bore exceeded a certain threshold, its existence on the material plane would instantly approach zero, avoiding direct damage to Luo Nan's brain tissue. But the pressure Luo Nan endured did not decrease at all. The virtual brain interface faithfully projected the terrifying power from the distant abyss of spacetime. The millions and millions of stars in the central region were instantly engulfed by the powerful stream of rays that was like a supernova explosion. There was a moment when Luo Nan practically believed that his fleshly body and soul were about to vaporize in an instant. A ruptured blankness appeared in his thoughts. It seemed that this blankness would extend forever. But Luo Nan inexplicably passed through this rupture zone a few seconds later. He woke up from his muddle-headed state, and he discovered to his surprise that his consciousness still had room to move about. He still had leeway to operate and control. Though the millions and millions of stars on the central planet endlessly swayed and flickered, shifting and deforming, the mystical I character that served as the main structure still maintained a relatively stable dynamic equilibrium. At the same time, the rattling and trembling sounds were like millions of wind chimes. They rapidly vibrated within the storm, yet they maintained a sweet-sounding timbre from beginning to end, revealing their extraordinarily stable structure. The vibrating sound actually came from the heavily chained crow. It pierced through the void where the energy storm wreaked havoc. It also pierced through the millions and millions of stars, becoming the skeleton, meridians, blood vessels, and nerves of the dancing god. The chain shuttled back and forth, interweaving densely. Though it trembled within the high-temperature and high-pressure storm, it did not deform. It was both a binding cage and an indestructible fortress. In addition, it guarded the surprisingly stable valve at the end of the passageway. Yes, if the terrifying storm from the distant abyss of space-time was truly allowed to descend, then even if there were 100, 1,000, or even 10,000 Luonans, they would all be turned to dust in an instant. But without a doubt, the heavily chained crow belonged to the unidirectional channel design. It was constructed from the firm and pure laws, forming a true insulator. It was like a large sluice, firmly blocking the majority of the terrifying storm's impact. It also protected Luo Nan's core consciousness and fundamental format. Hold on. Since there was such a large sluice, why was there still such a powerful storm leaking out? Luo Nan could only search for the reason from his own body. He didn't have any flaws when it came to the construction of his rational format. But in another domain, on the level of emotions and desires that he had just experienced, he was completely defenseless. Yes, this was the primer. It was also the gap in the crack. What the heck was this? Luo Nan didn't know whether or not he should seriously criticize himself. But right now, there was a more acute and direct problem. This terrifying storm that came from the distant abyss of space-time was endlessly penetrating through the gap and crack in his passageway. It was expanding to an even wider area. If the storm directly reached the plane of reality, how many people in the world would be like him, protected by the insulating fortress valve? Luo Nan shuddered when he considered this situation. He struggled, wanting to do something, but soon he discovered a phenomenon. This terrifying storm didn't seem to directly reach the plane of reality. Instead, it spread out from an unexpected region. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.